Hello and welcome to Deprogrammed on Unsafe Space. My name is Keri Smith. I'm here with my co-host Carter Laren. If it's your first time here, Deprogrammed is a deep dive show that we do into my old belief system, which most often I call social justice ideology. We have a very special guest today. I'm so excited for you guys to meet my friend Clifton Duncan, who is sporting a hat much sexier and more cool than my own. I really like that hat. And before we get into it, maybe Carter, you could read Clifton's official bio.
Sure. Thanks, Keri. Clifton is a classically trained professional actor and singer based in New York City, where he earned his MFA from the Tisch School of Art's prestigious graduate acting program. A dynamic and versatile performer, over the span of his career, he's earned standout reviews from outlets such as the LA Times, the Washington Post, Entertainment Weekly, and the New York Times, excelling in a variety of genres from Shakespeare to comedy to musical theater. I actually watched one of your Shakespeare videos recently, by the way. Well done. He's appeared off-Broadway in multiple critically acclaimed productions, including most recently the Classic Stage Company's smash revival of Carmen Jones, where he starred opposite two-time Tony Award winner Anika Noni Rose, and is it Noni or Noni? It's
Noni, yeah.
Noni, and starred on Broadway in the beloved British comedy The Play That Goes Wrong, co-produced by JJ Abrams. You may also have seen him guest starring for programs on Starz, Fox, NBC, and CBS, where he geeked out because he got to do a bunch of scenes with Scott Bakula on CSI New Orleans. I also would have geeked out for that. You can find him bullshitting about politics on Twitter at Clifton Duncan and on Instagram at Clifton Duncan Online. And make sure to check out his YouTube channel. We'll put links to his Twitter, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube all below in the show notes. Welcome, Clifton.
Hey, thank you for that lovely introduction.
I wonder who wrote it. It sounds like some genius wrote that introduction. It's beautiful.
I know. It's sometimes, people just, they send you stuff and it just turns out really well. I don't know how it happens. It's so mysterious.
It's amazing.
Clifton, I'm so excited to get to talk to you. Because we met via Twitter, I believe, and then I got to meet you in person during the pandemic this year. I met you in Atlanta. Yeah. What were you doing?
What I forgot what was happening. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, it's 2020, so it's been a constant stream of pleasantries. But
I drove home to South Carolina to see my family, and my fellow and I. And then I was going through Atlanta and said, "Hey, let's meet up," and that was so much fun. And one reason I'm really excited to talk to you is because after that meeting, I said to my boyfriend, I said, I don't know what he's going to end up doing online, but he's going to be a very important voice. He's going to do things once he figures out what it is he wants to do. And I think maybe this is just an outsider's perspective, but I think you're moving into that space of figuring out what it is you want to do and say online. Is that accurate?
Well, that's so crazy because I feel like that's exactly, it's sort of in a broader sense where I'm at in my life right now, because and I was sort of there when we met and we sat down, but I feel increasingly, it's really difficult for me to shut up about this kind of stuff, and it's really important to me. And at a certain point, I feel like there's certain shifts that are going on, just technologically and paradigmatically, like sociopolitically, but also at the same time, to be frank, it's tough. It's becoming tougher and tougher for me to feel like I belong in the entertainment industry as it is, it's a tough thing to say and realize, because the more that I enter into this space, it produces a lot of anxiety. I've got friends. I've been able to find friends. We feel as though we're living double lives, really, and you can't. One of the paradoxes of acting is that you have to have self-knowledge, and you're using yourself in service of these different characters. And if you spend years and years and years sort of biting your tongue and just not really engaging and sort of sitting back, and you can almost tell the people now that are sort of like, or I can discern who is sort of not really on I'll call it the crazy train, but people are offended by that now. But because there's sort of there's a deadness behind the eyes, and as actors, we can't afford to be. it's part of our job to be charismatic and compelling. And, if you're dead inside, if you're lying to yourself constantly, and it's not as though you're running down the street, dropping N-bombs and talking about how women shouldn't vote. It's just you have like completely conventional opinions, that once you get out of these bubbles of San Francisco or New York City or Los Angeles, you find that, regular people either don't care about this stuff or they just don't respond to these types of ideas. And, it's always refreshing when you find someone that shares your views, but it's like, we're just normal people who just have a cool job that we enjoy. We're not evil, but we're treated that way. And I think, the broader point is that, increasingly I feel as though, I'm not an axe murderer. I'm not some sort of sociopath. I came to my opinions and views, after long deliberation and organically and gradually. And, but it's tough for me, especially now, to feel as though I still have a place. I mean, in the industry, especially the more that I speak up about these types of things. So yeah, I don't know quite what I'm doing, but I am, as you said, I'm figuring it out. I feel like,
you're searching for truth. Well, there's something you said there that I think is the key point. You said you've come to your opinions after thoughtful deliberation, and I think that's what's missing a lot now, is that people just adopt these sort of received opinions, and whether they're on the right or the left, or I think it's easy to fall into this place of just adopting whatever beliefs your tribe has. And I certainly, when I was in social justice belief system, I didn't spend a lot of thoughtful deliberation on what I thought about things. It was more about just making sure I spoke the ideology correctly and didn't set off any tripwires, say the wrong thing. And so when you're talking about finding people who are like-minded, Carter and I talk a lot about how, wouldn't it be exciting if we could get back to a place where we can all disagree and argue again about interesting things instead, like maybe have for example, he's atheist, I'm a new Christian. We very rarely debate the existence of God. Not really interested in it because there's this more pressing environment of censorship and conformity that's happening around us. So we don't have the space to debate these. Wouldn't it be a nice luxury to be, finding out what all of our differences are? But in the meantime, it's sort of you find people who think like you, at least in terms of being open to having differing opinions and discussion and debate and thoughtful deliberation. So it sounds like you're saying that's not really the environment in the acting world has become thoroughly woke. Would that be an accurate statement or no?
Well, it's, I try to be careful because, and I feel torn because when you meet these individuals, and I've been privileged, especially over the past couple of years, as I've moved up in my career, the entertainment industry, it's, first of all, it's all those kind of weird, kind of kooky kids in high school that made references to all their favorite musicals, and were sort of annoying to everybody else. Those are the people that grow up to become the movie stars and writers and directors and producers of the future. So, what you have is a lot of interesting people, really unique people from all walks of life who have, interesting backgrounds. And in my experience, they're very warm and they're very caring about the things that they care about. And a lot of them are actually highly intelligent. I don't think you can be a great actor without having a degree of intelligence. Just in terms of the process that goes into crafting a great performance. And yet at the same time, I think it's a combination of the sorts of people that are drawn to the arts. I think one of my beefs with conservatives is that I think their pragmatism makes them tend to eschew the arts as a profession, and they look down on it. And, I have a close friend of mine who's way further to the right than I am. And even, she goes to shows, I take her to shows with me, but initially upon our meeting, she was like, well, acting produces nothing, entertainment, it produces nothing. And it's like, true, in a sense, it's not like we're manufacturing, furniture or cars, or we're farming. There's nothing. it's all intangible, what we produce. But then at the same time, they turn around and say, well, the libs own entertainment. And it's like, okay, well, you have to, you can walk over and join us. But if they do, and this goes back to what we were talking about, they'll be met with just a lot of hostility, a lot of vitriol. I mean, I was indirectly referred to brain dead independent, on a break from rehearsal for a concert that I was doing. And there's not only a resistance to any sort of, I mean, even centrist or moderate opinions. There's a hatred about it, and part of what really bugs me about it is that part of my training. I I went to a fancy conservatory. It's, they only take 2% of their applicants, and it's one of the best. And we learned that curiosity and empathy are two of the cornerstones of acting. When you're building a character, you have to keep asking yourself questions and just dig deeper and why is this person behaving this way? And even if I don't like this person, what is it that's driving them to do these things that I detest? So I can understand, so I can play this character. And I feel a lot of people calling themselves actors right now are exercising neither of those attributes as far as their politics. It's, you'll be in these rehearsal rooms, and some of the most asinine things I've ever heard. This is one that really sent me through the roof. We're trying to rehearse this. I'm not going to be specific, but it's an adaptation of a popular movie that we're turning basically into a musical. You know what I mean? It's a ridiculous show. But we're stopping rehearsal every 15 minutes because, did you see what Donald Trump did now? I'm like, yo, can we just rehearse this dumb show? You know what I mean? And hope the check's clear. But, there's one point where I'm doing this thing and they were like, this director was like, a lot of Republican women, they vote with their husbands because they're afraid of them. And I was like, what? That's one of the most misogynistic things I've ever heard in my life. I had to leave the room when I heard that. But then I heard it again. I was guest starring on another show, and one of the actresses on set said the same thing. So I'm like, this is sort of a thing on I guess it's the left, if you want to call it that. Yeah. And you can tell immediately that these people have no engagement whatsoever with people that think differently from them. It's like, it's like, really, Republican women don't have agency. Conservative women, are you Candace Owens has no agency. Michelle Malkin, Ann Coulter, Heather McDonald. Now, I could agree or disagree with any of these women, but to say that any of these women could be ruled or controlled by their husband, it's an insult to them. So it throws out the window this idea that you are. We're for women's rights or women's freedom or whatever. It's like, no, it's only certain kind of women. It's quite obvious that there's only certain types of women or minorities, allowed.
It excuses them from having to explain why some women disagree with them. Because if they didn't say they were just afraid of their husbands, they would have to explain why Candace Owens has a different opinion. But if they can chalk it up to, these people have no agency, then we don't have to investigate anymore, which is almost a willful anti-curiosity, to get back to your curiosity point.
It's anti-curiosity. There's no attempt to really engage. And it's weird because they say, well, this person lacks agency, that they're just afraid of whatever, but that's sort of the same argument that they use against minorities who don't go along with the social justice line. It's like, and it's almost not always, but it's often like white leftists or liberal. I don't even know what to call these people anymore. I don't want to call them liberals because it feels like they sort of soil the name of liberalism. But they tell you that you don't understand the ideas that you're saying. You've internalized this bigotry and this racism, and it's so condescending and insulting. It's like people, it's one thing you could just say that I think that they're wrong or that they're misguided or, whatever. But they say, no, that they're stupid and they have no idea what they're doing. And, they're unable to think. It's so insulting. And I
see that a lot. It's anti-curious, right? I've seen that a lot about Black conservatives in the social justice groups that I'm in online. There's always this accusation because, they say, They say one thing, but they behave another way. So they say we need to shut up and listen to Black voices, but then they behave a different way. They say, well, not that Black voice, not that Black voice, or that Black voice, or that Black voice. Oh, well, why not those? And then it's always, well, they're a puppet for white men.
That's
or
exactly,
they're, yeah, they don't have agency. They're not, those aren't their opinions. They're just being used, or, they're too dumb to realize they're manipulated or whatever. Can you tell us a little bit about so I'm thinking of this question because you said you hesitate to call them liberals. And I do the same. I still consider myself liberal on a lot of issues, more conservative on other issues now, but I don't like ceding the term liberal to them and giving it up, because they are social justice, at least in practice, the way it's practiced, is very illiberal. It seems to support censorship, and it doesn't create a welcome environment for disagreement or compromise or seeking truth, or creativity even. It's not a good environment for creativity, and it's not liberal. And so I don't even know what I am anymore. We get called all kinds of things. We occasionally get people calling us liberal loons, but we also get people calling us alt-right now, which is crazy. What is your trajectory and political opinions? Do you describe yourself as a liberal, a conservative, independent? Like what has been your story?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of in the same place. I mean, I'm holding to the title liberal because, I don't really jive with the progressive mindset, even if, their ideals are fine. But that's not really my team. But at the same time, I feel like, I don't really fit in well with conservatives for a variety of reasons. I mean, I joke all the time. It's like, dude, I'm a pot smoking pro-choice atheist who loves show tunes and Judy Garland. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what? Conservatives are really like
white supremacist.
Exactly. It's ridiculous. So, but also psychologically, I feel like I'm just more of and part of it is, I think, why I'm an actor is I'm just more open, and that's sort of how I go through the world. I'm sort of impressionable in a way. I'm interested in a lot of things. Sometimes I feel conservatives can be a bit too stodgy. Libertarianism, again, they seem cool to me, and I don't know that much about their ideology yet, but but it doesn't feel to me intuitively like I really fit into that camp. So right now I'm holding to, I'm a very liberal-minded person, but I think conservatives are sort of, they have valid points as well and concerns. Although I will say, because when we met, I mentioned I was reading Thomas Sowell's A Conflict of Visions, and it's sort of, I think everyone should read that book to kind of understand, the divisions that we're seeing right now. And I'm starting to use terms like liberal and conservative a bit less now. And I think it's more about realists versus idealists. And I think those are healthier terms because they don't come with the baggage that liberal and conservative do, but they also, I think, highlight the strengths and the flaws of both ideologies in a way. Like a more conservative minded person will be more of a realist. So, the idealist will say we have healthcare for all, but the realist is like, that sounds great. How do we pay for it? And so I think that you need the dreamers and the idealists and the romanticists in your society, but you also need the people that are going to keep them in check and say, okay, we need to be pragmatic about this and practical and figure out how to work this out. So, I mean, I have great admiration for both sides. I mean, I feel it's a false dichotomy, but I mean, you know what I'm saying. So, to sum up, I don't quite know what I call myself. I try not to be partisan, but it's very difficult these days. And, I have my own biases, obviously. But as far as my journey, getting back to the second part of your question, it was very gradual. Like I said, it was organic. I mean, I got out of my fancy schmancy grad school. I mean, I'm one of those people that paid an exorbitant amount of money for a pretty much useless degree. But, I got out and I was in a very bad place. It was during the recession. And I found this book at Borders. Remember Borders?
And I loved Borders, just FYI. I thought Borders was
kind of it was a cool place to be. Yeah. But there was a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy by a guy named Robert Glover. And at the time I was suffering with severe depression, and I picked up this book. And it was the first book that I had read that was unabashedly pro-male. And it was about getting rid of your quote unquote nice guy syndrome and becoming a healthy, he calls it an integrated male. And it was the first time I'd read anything that didn't say that men are trash, that we're inferior to women and that we're garbage and that we're useless, which is an idea that I'd sort of internalized a long time ago. And shortly after that, I started going to the gym and just, weight training. And I found that the more that I embraced my masculinity, the happier that I was, and the more work that I got, to be honest. And, it began cascading from there, where I'm like, well, there's nothing wrong with being a guy. And, and it was conflicting with all, I know, right? It's insane to say that.
Hold on, we're going to have to cut that part out so we don't get banned from YouTube.
Yeah,
that sounds really close to saying it's okay to be white. And we know how happens of that.
Okay. Let's not get crazy. Let's not go too far into next thing you're going to be talking about how the frogs are turning gray. You fucking extremist. So then I began to internalize that, but then in 2014 is when it really began to take off. And, but by that point, the Ferguson riots were starting, and this is a couple of years after the Trayvon Martin killing. And by this point, this is about August, and there was a little controversy called Gamergate that erupted. Yes. And I consider myself a gamer. I'm a part of that culture. I haven't, I own a Switch right now, so I don't know if that really counts. But, I keep up with the culture and the hobby via YouTube and online and everything. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And I saw the whole thing unfold. But then I saw how it was covered in the news versus what was actually happening. And week after week, it was internet drama at first. It started with a sex scandal. So it was like, ooh, this is kind of fun and juicy. I can kill some time reading about all this crazy stuff. I'm not going to get into what it was all about because it's so convoluted unless you were there from the beginning. But stop me if you heard this before. There were progressive journalists who were gatekeeping what stories could and could not be printed. There were moderators at various message boards, as well as other journalists and outlets who were straight up censoring any discussion about this topic. They were protecting bad actors because they were in their tribe with this group of San Francisco game developers and their journalist friends. So it really became a microcosm of many of the issues I began to. It was the seed of my skepticism. I'd already had problems with the media. Ironically, following people like Glenn Greenwald since 2005, who's been very consistent in his criticisms of the press. And so I was already like, these people are garbage. But to see the tribalism, to see the squelching of any sort of dissent, to see how all of these quote unquote journalists were injecting their activism into, I just want to read, how good is the game? Are the graphics cool? Are the gameplay mechanics sound? Is there a good story? Am I going to have fun? Is there a great replay value? Back in the day when you read, Electronic Gaming Monthly or Game Pro or Nintendo Power, it was like you read the reviews, you read the cheat section, you look at what's coming up next. And that was kind of it. No one wants to go to their video game website and read about how they're this sort of toxic, misogynistic, person. I'm like, dude, it's video games, bro. Like, this is a medium which features aliens and robots and ogres and all kinds of creatures as protagonists. And we're talking about diversity. What the fuck are we talking about? It's video games. Like, no one picks up, Mega Man and is like, this is a white male. Get some fucking robot. It's fake. You know what I mean? It's fake. And
wait, that's a great point. I can't believe they haven't, or actually I haven't looked. They probably have gone back and disavowed Mario Brothers and stuff for lack of diversity. Have they?
Well, there's the whole narrative because, the Mario franchise is, we're going to go save the princess. And so that, is a sexist trope, in and of itself. It's just this toxically masculine idea of like wanting to save someone you care about. It's
how dare they?
It's totally twisted.
How dare men want to save people they care about? I know. I'm upset about it. It's offensive.
I can see your face turning red right now as we speak. I'm sorry to have offended you.
I'm so upset about this.
I'm so insensitive. But I saw the press coverage of it, and it was so unbelievably one-sided. And when you see, I had the secondhand experience of having this controversy reported as this right wing terrorist movement that was seeking to get women out of gaming. It got so big that it even spawned an infamous Law and Order SVU episode about the incident, which satisfied nobody. But I was like, it's insane, because there were plenty of minorities, there were plenty of women, and also sexual minorities that were like, no, we see what the gamergaters are saying and we support them, but they were completely ignored. I mean, stop me if you've heard this before. They were ignored. They were insulted. I mean, I had people telling me that, you don't understand the nature of what's going on. White people, you know what I mean? Just talking down to me as if I don't know what's going on. And I was astounded just at how flagrantly dishonest the coverage was, but also how people like, I'll say the name, like Anita Sarkeesian or Brianna Wu were showered with this fawning press attention. Zoe Quinn is another one.
Zoe Quinn.
Who keeps failing upwards somehow.
I'm going to cut in just for a second.
Yeah.
I was on the wrong side of Gamergate because I was full in the social justice world then. And I was at the time producing a late night comedy show with one of my clients, W. Kamau Bell. We had a show on FX. And when all the Gamergate stuff was happening, I did a lot of things. I didn't dive deep into it. I didn't read about where it started. I didn't read about the, like you said, the sex scandal and stuff. I just knew surface level what my tribe, social justice tribe, believed. And I was the kind of person who would retweet Brianna Wu or Anita Sarkeesian or Zoe Quinn without even knowing what I was a mouthpiece for. And years afterwards, when I started leaving my echo chamber and trying to figure out what I really thought about things, I went back. I knew it would take a while. I went back and did a deep dive into Gamergate. And I read the blogs from Zoe Quinn's boyfriend, and I read all about how talk about a narcissistic sociopath. That woman, when you say she's failed up, well, yes, because that's what narcissists do. And she abused that guy. This is my opinion. She abused that guy and then painted him as the abuser. And that just became the story. And people believe it. And people believe narcissists. They are good at manipulating their image. And so I have a fascination with that part of it, aside from my opinions about Gamergate, is just how because sometimes I look at, like, Brianna Wu has tons of people follow her, and it is shocking. Mm-hmm. On one hand, it's how can you not see who this person is? But on the other hand, it's like, well, that's the nature of that kind of personality type, I think, is they do attract followers and people who are willing to attack others on their behalf, which is people like me. I was willing to attack others on the behalf of these horrible people, and I had no idea what I was really doing. You know what I mean? It's weird.
Yeah. It's. I mean, you want to. I mean, you want to give people the benefit of the doubt, and you know, and so I think maybe that's a positive note about maybe our humanity or our good-naturedness. You know, we want to help people. We want to protect them if we perceive that they're vulnerable. And all the reporting was just about how all these horrible people were just sending death threats and abuse. Yes. And some of that was happening. But what wasn't being reported on is that it was happening on both sides of the issue. And, you know, and it was astounding to me that, I mean, actually David Pakman, who you know, I have my mixed feelings about him, but he actually interviewed some of these people that were at the center of this. I mean, he interviewed Brianna Wu, and and another man named Arthur Chu, who were like on the other side of the issue. And in both of these interviews, I mean, I appreciated what David did because, you know, I mean, he was sympathetic to them, but he also challenged them. And you could see right away that it was like, they were kind of just not, they were not all together there. And you sort of begin to worry about their mental health, which I feel like is sort of a common theme among a lot of these people. And I don't mean to say that in a condescending way or a judgmental way, but, you know, birds of a feather flock. What is it? They flock together. They flock.
They do that as well.
Birds of a feather flock together, you know, and well, I guess they flock together too. But so, you know, maybe, I don't know what it is about these movements that, this is sort of something I've been thinking about lately as well. You know, they seem to attract people who are deeply insecure and who have lots of problems. And, you know, and Jordan Peterson, I mean, there goes my cancellation. You can't talk about Jordan Peterson now. I mean, you know, I mean, I really like his idea of like, you know, life is hard. You know, life is tragic. Bad things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people. And there's always going to be somebody that hates you. The proper response is not to shrink away. It's to build yourself up so that you have the esteem and the inner strength and the resiliency to face all of these challenges and face all these things. But I feel like we are prioritizing frailty over I don't know, achievement, over strength, over
strength,
over anything productive that could be positive in your life. And we're indulging people who, frankly, I think just, you know, they need some kind of counseling and help as opposed to, you know, being given huge platforms like Twitter or YouTube, you know, or jobs at the New York Times. You know, can you believe, I know this is a complete non sequitur, but it's like, how on earth is an op-ed from Tom Cotton harming, you know, your Black staff at the New York Times? Like, are you kidding me? You work at the New York Times. You're doing something right. But someone writing, you know, an op-ed about a position that is not unpopular, you know, about sending in troops to stop, to quell riots, which Obama did in Ferguson, you know, how are you harming these people? I just can't imagine someone like my grandmother, who was born in 1936, complaining that somebody wrote some words people like, you know what I mean? Or, you know, my mom, who was in the military for 17 years, and, you know, I think she got out as like an E6 or E7 sergeant. And, you know, she had her complaints, but I mean, she's like this 5'3" woman who, you know, with glasses on, but nobody was fucking with her. You know what I mean? Like she's not letting anybody push her around. So why is it? And why is it that these people are able to bear up and move forward? But these people who are in the lap of privilege, who are living at the greatest time ever to be alive in human history, why are they so frail? Why are they so afraid of everything? Why are they so triggered by op-ed?
And with jobs at the New York Times, right? Like yeah, these cushy jobs at the New York Times. You're reminding me of have you read Coddling of the American Mind by Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt?
It's on my backlog, but I did read the original article. Yeah.
I think you would really get a lot out of it because they dive into this question specifically about how self improvement and introspection is kind of vilified, and externalizing all your problems is encouraged, and how we've kind of built a generation of people with around incentives that incentivize dysfunction, like psychological dysfunction. So I think, without being super judgmental, I know you're not trying to be condescending to these people, but I think there is a larger proportion of dysfunction than in the past. There's a lot of dysfunction out there on some level, and there's an encouragement to wallow in that dysfunction. And that dysfunction is actually worn as a badge. You see people on Twitter put, you know, they list their psychological problems on Twitter as badges. Like, I have ADHD, and also I have this, and also I have that, and depression. Those aren't badges, but they historically weren't badges, but they are now. And so when that's the kind of environment you have, there's no incentive to actually fix yourself, right?
It's virtue from oppression.
Yes.
So like you're saying, yeah, there's an incentive to view yourself as oppressed and make it part of your identity. And if your victimization, because Tom Cotton wrote an op-ed, there's virtue in that, in saying, not real virtue, but there's this, in this belief system, there's in this belief system, there's a virtue in saying I was harmed by that article, or in saying I am depression, that's who I am. I'm oppressed because of my mental health problems or because my frailty.
And I think it's one of these things, and I had a talk with a friend about this, and, who was more progressive than I am. And we both agreed to, we are, it kind of goes back to what you were saying, Carter. We are, what's the word I'm looking for? We are lionizing people who are dwelling in their, whatever their stuff is. And, and I say this as somebody who, I used to struggle with severe depression. I still have my days, And again, that's part of my temperament. I'm an actor. I just, that my emotional life is, it's just there. But you learn how to control that, as a professional. And, when one of the things that bothers me the most, and this sort of was one of the things that accelerated my decision to be like, you know what, man, I can't align myself with these people anymore. Heart conditions like heart disease, especially in the Black community. It's one of the number one killers, if not the number one killer. And we die. We have the best athletes in the world, but we also have some of the worst health outcomes. And it's things like hypertension and diabetes. High blood pressure runs in my family. I was diagnosed with. I was prescribed medication for my high blood pressure when I was 25 years old. Now, thankfully, after a decade of working out and exercise, I've gotten it under control, which I'm very proud of. But then you have people on the other side who are like talking about body positivity or fat acceptance. And I'm thinking to myself, how can you claim that you stand for Black lives, yet you are putting forth this idea that will inevitably lead to more Black death? I just don't understand that. And, this idea that, sex positivity is another thing. Have you, according to the CDC, have you seen the rates of STI infection, particularly among Black women? And again, I said I'm pro-choice, but, the rates of abortion in these communities, how much life are we snuffing out or preventing from ever seeing the light of day? And these people who claim to stand for people who look like me are pushing these things, which I feel are leading to not only the kind of group destruction, but just to personal immiseration, spiritually, physically, mentally, financially. And and they fail to see the contradictions in there. The contradictions are a feature, not a bug. And at a certain point, I said, I really don't feel as though these people genuinely care about Black lives. I was one of the few people, I think, that actually went to Black Lives Matter's, the organization, their website, back in like 2014 when the movement really rose to prominence. And I knew immediately, first of all, there was scant, if any, mention of police brutality on the website whatsoever. And I'm like, you have people out here, burning down cities. Stop me if you've heard this one before, and destroying all this property because they think that they're protesting police brutality, which is something that everyone can get behind, by the way. Mm-hmm. And yet I go to the website and it's a bunch of intersectional buzzwords. It's a lot of sort of, I guess I'd call it, radical, progressive. I don't know what you would call it, but all the terminology was there on the site. And there was one entry in particular that really pissed me off. It said, we want to protect the safety of, it was like mothers and some other word for mothers, parents, no mention of fathers. And, wow. And one of the embarrassing things for me in my life is to say, like, I grew up without my father. And I feel like, there was a comedian named Patrice O'Neill who was talking about the same things. Patrice, right? Yeah, you're in the comedy world, so But he was like, I feel like I'm learning shit 10 years too late. And that's what I feel like, as someone who grew up without a father in his life. So to see that these people, formatted this website and deliberately skipped over father, because then when you come down to cities like Atlanta or you talk to Black people, they know what part of the problem is. They know that there's an absence of good, strong, positive male role models. And yet here we have this organization which is claiming to speak or claiming to champion Black people, but they're deliberately omitting fathers from the equation whatsoever. And that to me said immediately, this is 2014, I said, no, they are not serious at all about what they're going for. They are more concerned about themselves and putting forth whatever their agenda is, which I think, frankly, it's not really about Black people. It's about using Black people and trans people and gay people to achieve another end. And that has nothing to do with any of us. I said, these people, I can't support these people. But of course, that's what makes me a pariah and among the circles that I used to travel in.
Yeah.
Right.
That's very interesting that you were able to read between the lines back in 2014, because I know recently they scrubbed their site when people were pointing out. Yeah, they were pointed out that they were talking about destruction of the nuclear family, and I think did they talk about Marxism on the page?
They did, I think, talk about Marxism. Yeah.
I don't remember if they did. I do know there was that video of one of the co-founders saying that she's a trained Marxist, but yeah, they totally were like, the nuclear family. But then when you actually talk to Black people, I mean, they know, and this is one of the things about being down in Atlanta and outside of a progressive bubble that I've really enjoyed. Down here in Atlanta, you have artists, there's illustrators, there's musicians, we have young entrepreneurs, there's architects, dentists. And I'm meeting these people partly because of my job, which I won't divulge because I don't want crazy people, coming after me. But I'm like, there's an entrepreneurial spirit and a spirit of just hustling and just trying to not just make it, but live life. And I feel like that's what we need. We don't need people telling us how bad everything is. We need people who are entrepreneurial and they're self-starters and they have that spirit inside of them where they're like, I'm going to go get it. And on top of all of that, people, they understand that it's a good idea to have a functional upbringing. You know what I mean? Like they understand that families are a good thing. And Black people, as an atheist, I say that Black people are more Christian than not. Mm-hmm. And I think as such, they also understand the importance of family. So to see that this organization claiming to speak on behalf or to advocate on behalf of Black people while omitting things that are so important and so key to so many Black people. I mean, you can't be a Marxist and an entrepreneur. It doesn't quite work that way. But when I talk to people down here, and that's their spirit, they say, people down here are far more heterodox in their thinking, which is really refreshing than in a city like New York, where they think that they know everything, but they actually know very little. And it's just refreshing to see people that are like, I think capitalism is good, and we need more entrepreneurs, and I have my own business, and I'm an illustrator. Come check out my drawings. I'm a musician. Come and buy my music. I mean, people are trying to build their lives down here, and I think if they really understood what the underpinnings of the BLM movement were about, I think they would think twice about supporting it as ardently as they do.
But it has a great name.
Well, see, okay, here's another thing, and people aren't making the distinction. So, you have to break it down in 3 levels. I'm not the first person to do this, but, I spoke to a friend earlier and I was like, look, here's why I don't support Black Lives Matter. I support it as a sentiment, as a slogan, as a phrase. It's sort of an empty platitude. Well, Black Lives Matter. Okay. Yeah, we get it. Yeah. I agree. But as an organization, I've already, gone through the reasons why I don't support them. And then as a political movement, it's another thing as well. So it's sort of a linguistic piece of genius because, they've played it now, opposition to the organization and opposition to the movement with opposition to Black Lives Mattering. And it's, and it's difficult to, like, I tell a short story about, back when I was still in this, whatever this haze was, and Barack Obama had just been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, which he richly deserved.
Is that sarcasm?
Could you tell? But this was back when I was on Facebook, and someone pointed out to me very racistly, he's not done anything to win the prize. And I remember, it's like that NPC meme where they have like the little loading sign. I literally went through that process where I was like, And then I type back, "You're just a hater, ha," and then close my laptop. And that was it. Because, that's as deep as you have to go. You can just be snarky and clever and funny, and that's it. And, you don't need, when you win plaudits from your friends for standing up for what's right, there's no need to go any deeper into the problem. But I understand that mindset of, you're challenging my assumptions, and you're just an idiot, and you're wrong, and you're probably racist, so I'm just going to shut you down and not listen to you. So I understand where that's coming from. And I think this is another thing I've been thinking about. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm ranting a lot, but I'm so excited. I don't get to talk about these things very often. But, I think we make a huge mistake by saying that these people are not being logical, because to us, they are being illogical, but to them, we are also being illogical. It's just that they're being logical based on the assumptions they make based on their worldview. If you assume that America is racist and it's a racist country, and that it's built on white supremacy, then of course it's going to fall in line with a bunch of other assumptions, and no other analysis will be necessary. And I think a lot of white people in America don't really understand the depths of the indoctrination of this idea and this ideology. By the time I was 10 years old, I was weaponizing charges of racism against white people. I had a substitute teacher named Miss Paradise, and I was running my mouth. I was probably like 9, 10 years old in class, and she rightly called us out. And a few of the black kids, we were like, "She's racist. She's racist." And at one point, she just snapped. She's like, "I'm not racist." This is back in the 90s. And
was this in Europe? Just to quick, was this in Europe?
This was in Belgium. This is in okay. Yeah. I was on a military base going to school there. And there are a lot of Americans that were there as well. But and I had friends who were Dutch, who were Greek, who were Turkish, who were British. From all over. And it was a great time, but even still, like, there was this idea that this white woman is talking to me in this way because she's a racist. And when you grow up in an environment where all your friends and relatives are telling you that, your favorite athletes are telling you that, the comedians you watch, the sitcoms you watch are telling you that, if you're a lover of rap or hip hop music, that's a huge component of the culture and the music. You watch the news, you go to school, it's still being reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. So it's very, very difficult. You have to have sympathy for people because they've been told this all their lives, by people that are very influential and who matter to them. And when you challenge that idea of, well, actually, maybe white people don't all hate you, maybe some of them are kind of cool. It becomes very difficult to restructure your programming because it's so deep. And that's why I get kind of pessimistic about it, because I feel like it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And we've got generations now of this kind of thing that's being taught to people.
I share your pessimism on that a lot, which is, and I hate to say it, but I mean, when you brought up, for example, fatherlessness in the Black community, which is also increased in other communities, but particularly in the Black community, it made me think of something that I think a lot of people don't realize, how behind the scenes, the intellectual justification for a lot of these ideas has been percolating for decades. And it didn't just burst onto the scene in 2014 through BLM, but there's lots of academic groundwork that was laid beforehand. I mean, you made me think of, in the late 80s, Keri knows this, but Kimberly Crenshaw, who was one of the grandmothers, I guess, of critical race theory. Kimberly Crenshaw explicitly called out this idea that nuclear families, or that families that included a mother and a father, were somehow preferable to other kinds of families as a racist idea. And she criticized the white community for daring to suggest that Black families might be better off with a mother and a father. How dare they suggest that? Because Black families are different and they have different needs, and there's no reason for fathers necessarily in Black families. There's a different way of having kids, and that was equally valid. And of course, the data doesn't prove that out at all. That's totally contrary to all the data we've collected on raising kids. And regardless of what color your skin is, raising kids with two parents is better than raising kids with one parent. And that's pretty clear. And it's an indicator of success, or it's a predictor of failure. That correlates pretty well. But this stuff has been lying under the surface. And so I think what's happened is you get a lot of intellectuals that feel like they are armed with this information. So they feel like they're right. They must be right because they've read Kimberly Crenshaw. Like Keri studied this in college, right? You can come out feeling like you're right. I've got this entire body of academic work behind me proving that it's racist to want fathers in black families. And eventually, that trickles out to BLM, and it goes and gets into the mainstream media, and it trickles out. And it's obviously not just that one issue. It's that whole philosophy. And I think we're now just kind of seeing it metastasize into mainstream culture. And I think a lot of people are looking at it going, wait a minute, this is kind of insane. Where did it come from? But we've been under the surface for decades.
It coincided with the feminist movement, the women's studies classes also. Attacking the nuclear family. And you're making me think of this book we read in my women's studies classes called Woman on the Edge of Time. I definitely want to do this in book club sometime, Carter. It's a novel. It's basically a feminist utopian sci-fi novel. It's about the future what a feminist world might look like. But if I were to read it now, I haven't read it since then. If I were to read it now, I'd probably read it as dystopian, though that was not the intent. And so in this novel, in the future, children are not raised by a nuclear family. They're raised by a committee that's very diverse in terms of race and sexuality and sex.
But
and
not
gender.
Ideology, I'm sure.
But not ideology. And they're raised by this little committee of people, and this is supposed to be it's presented as ideal. Now we will remove all of the societal indoctrination because we've selected by committee this group of people to raise each child. It's like, I don't know. It's interesting to me how all these different parts of social justice have come together. They're all pushing the same thing. They've been absorbed by the same thing. So if you take stuff that I think was necessary for progress, things that were necessary for progress, like the suffragist movement, like the civil rights movement and gay marriage movement, those things, though, have they've achieved the measurable goals. And then the organizations and the people who are still in that making money off of these ideas, it's not like those organizations just fold up and close shop once you've achieved the measurable goals. It's like they continue on, and I think they've all kind of become part of the same Marxist identitarian, belief system that's still fighting. Now it's fighting, instead of having measurable end goals, it's fighting these vague boogeymen that you can't really measure. Like, what are the goals of the current social justice movement? Well, to fight patriarchy and white supremacy
which is literally everywhere. Yeah. Right.
Well, they state explicitly that they want a revolution. And what I was going to say is that, I did a show back in 2012 called The Scottsboro Boys. It was created by the same people that did the musical Chicago and Cabaret. And it's based on the true story in the early 1930s of this group of 9 young Black boys who were falsely accused of rape by these 2 white women. And what I found in my research is that the Communist Party was very, very deeply involved in the civil rights movement. They yes. rightly assessed that and again, because I knew nothing about communism, I didn't know what it was or what it meant, which I think most people do not. They correctly saw that, the grievances of these people can be used to our ends. So this is back in the 30s. Mm-hmm. So the connection between, so now even my thinking about the civil rights movement and the gains that we're told were made during that period of time. Even those now I kind of put into question as, received opinions that we've been told, but maybe the story is probably a little bit more complicated. I mean, it's one thing to talk about, say, the bus boycott in Selma. And you read about just how for months and months, people were carpooling. They were being arrested for loitering by police who, for walking to work. I mean, it was a really stunning, piece of organization and advocacy and activism, but from an economic perspective. So when those bus companies stopped getting that black dollar, they were like, okay, you niggas can sit in the front now. You know what I mean? So even then, for me, it's less about like, we're advocating for rights, but it's more of an economic perspective, and when you listen to people like Tom Sowell or Walter E. Williams and listen to their perspective and how, money talks and it does accomplishes a lot of things. You start to sort of think to yourself, like, maybe something else is going on here. Maybe I've been lied to. Maybe there's more than one way to skin a cat. Maybe freedom can be achieved by different means. But to go back to the broader point in your conversation is, as far as what they want, I mean, I think and it's tough to explain this to people without sounding like some crazy conspiracy theorist. Yeah. It's just because you've done, I've just started my journey, but you're doing the reading and you see these things and you make these connections that are actually true. And, they want to overthrow the quote unquote system. That's what they want. They say they want a revolution. That's what they're calling it explicitly. These ideas of patriarchy or meritocracy, or, that infamous poster that was put out by the Smithsonian, the African American Museum, in DC about,
showing up on time is white supremacy and reason is white supremacy.
Punctuality, anything that could actually lead to you living a better and more responsible life is the domain of white people. And going back to something that you said, Carter, it's one thing if you're in a poor working neighborhood. When I was 13 or 14, there was one day, I'm down in Virginia at this point, and and it's not a rich area of Virginia whatsoever. It's not a slum, but it ain't the Ritz, And for whatever reason, one day we were supposed to go to school. We were bused to school, like Kamala Harris wasn't. And I'm standing on the corner. This bus is not coming for whatever reason, and there's this other black kid that's there with me from the neighborhood. He's smoking a Black and Mild. He's 14 or whatever. He looks me up and down. I was not a cool kid. I don't know if you could tell, but I was never a cool kid. And he just goes, "You one of the smart ones, ain't you?" And at the time, I thought to myself, well, here we go. I'm going to get made fun of because I don't wear, I don't sag my pants, and I try to do my homework and yada, yada, yada. And, it happens in a lot of, like, I guess, lower or working class sort of environments where, it's a crab bucket mentality, and the kids who try to strive for something, they get beat up or they get made fun of. They get bullied for being nerds or geeks. But then when you're black, there's the added calumny of, well, you're not even who you are. You're not even black because you're trying to, because you turn your homework in on time.
Yep.
And at the time I was offended. But then later on in hindsight, I said to myself, wait a minute, he is differentiating himself from me. I don't know if there's any white people going around knocking on doors being like, hey, darky, you're never going to be shit. Like, it was him who was differentiating himself from me, and I was the kind of kid, I was helping some of the other kids with their spelling, and with their handwriting, and I was a smart kid. But what's amazing to me now is that it used to just be the poorer people who would say, you're just trying to be white. This is, you talk a certain way, you sound like a white person, you're trying to be white, this, that. But now it's filtered up into these educated elite classes to the point where, I'm arguing with doctorates and people with PhDs and degrees who are saying that striving for economic and financial success is another form of striving for whiteness. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but there's a lot of Japanese and Nigerian businessmen who feel differently about that. You know what I mean? It's the strangest thing now. It's the strangest thing. It's in all these sectors now.
That's an excellent point, because you're right. It is now an elite kind of opinion that's being broadcasted by people who have achieved success and who went to elite institutions. but they're saying that it's somehow this is a whiteness thing, or if you, I don't know. I think that's a great point.
It's always everybody else. It's always everybody else. It's like it's not me who has the PhD and went to study and has this cushy job, at the New York Times or at a university or whatever. It's everyone else that's the problem. It's not me who's striving for whiteness by pursuing tenure. It's everyone else. So it's always, again, once you step out of it and you see just how ridiculous and how self-contradictory so much of this crap is, and how hypocritical and how hollow so many of these people are. I mean, it's really astonishing. And it's amazing to see people just continue to fail upwards to the point where they're receiving, I don't know, Emmy Awards for bullshitting about COVID.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name names.
No. I have no idea who you're talking about. No idea.
No, me either. I don't know where that came from.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up, though, the revolution aspect of this, because I do think they are not united in terms of a positive goal, but all these disparate groups on what we'll call maybe the radical left, they are united in the destruction of Western civilization, which sounds very grandiose, but they are all united against a common enemy. And that enemy is basically the current system. It's Western civilization as such, Enlightenment values, the kind of classically liberal ideas that helped America prosper. And it does sound like a conspiracy theory to say things. I'm glad you're the one who brought it up, but because it does sound conspiratorial when people say, I think a lot of people say things like, or especially conservatives, they have this knee-jerk or gut reaction that like, oh, these people are commies. And I don't think commies is a very nuanced word to describe what they believe. I don't think that's technically correct. But directionally, there's actually a lot of truth with very broad strokes. They're kind of commies. This has been going on. It started with it was radical Marxism. It came through the Frankfurt School into the U.S. It picked up some postmodernism. It developed into critical theory, and it's this amalgamation of, I would say, lots of different paths to some variant of Marxism, all kind of marching together. Lots of different Marxist variant ideologies, all marching together against the same enemy. And it sounds conspiratorially and crazy to say, well, actually, this has been going on since the 30s. But you're not wrong. It has been going on since the 30s, and this is just the culmination of that.
I think the lawyer's name, I want to say his name is Stanley Leibowitz or whatever, was a lawyer that was hired to defend the Scottsboro boys. And this side note, it was kind of funny because the fact that he was Jewish made him completely unpopular he was almost as unpopular as the black people down in Scottsboro, Alabama. But he was funded by the Communist Party. I believe so. I mean, I'm sure somebody will fact check me, but when it's just, you see these things, it's just the truth. It's just what happened. And
what it makes me think of is that, did you ever see the Brett Weinstein lecture called How the Magic Trick is Done? Mm-hmm. It's a great lecture where he talks a little bit about what happened at Evergreen to him. But one part that's really interesting is he's talking about people who are pushing sort of social justice forward. That's my phrasing, but he's saying, a lot of times you're walking down a path with someone, you think you're on the same page, and I'm totally paraphrasing, it's been a while since I've seen the video, but you think you're on the same page. And so you have actual liberals walking shoulder to shoulder with these identitarian Marxists who want to destroy Western civilization. And they think they're on the same path because they have the same goals to a certain point. Once you've reached those goals, they're on a very different trajectory. And in fact, the liberals are their enemies. But a lot of liberals don't seem to realize this yet. So to take it back to your point, Clifton, to talk about the 1930s, the fact that the Communist Party was infiltrating and pushing certain aspects of women's liberation and the civil rights movement, and like the International Women's Day was started by the Socialist Party of America. It was a socialist, in the 1920s. And it doesn't mean that the movement didn't achieve things that were necessary and good. It just means you've got different types of people with different motivations working on a common goal. And then once that goal is achieved, beyond that goal, they're going on two different paths. And that is hard to talk about without sounding like you're some crazy conspiracy theorist, or without sounding like you don't like the fact that women got the vote or something.
I would see people throw around the term cultural Marxism, and I have no idea what that means. If you talk to some people, I mean, I'm sure you've seen this as well. They'll say, well, it's an anti-Semitic trope. And,
I've seen that. Yeah.
Which is, I've only seen that coming from, I guess, more left-leaning people. I've never seen Jews brought up in any of these discussions. That's a non sequitur. But it wasn't until I read the Communist Manifesto that I actually began to see the parallels and understood why, okay, Marx's views on social or on economics are simply being transfused or transplanted into views on gender or race or sexual identity. And, and once you begin to see those connections and those parallels, at least once I began to see them, I said, oh, I understand, because the same flaws in Marxist thinking, I feel like Marx, he's not completely wrong about, I guess, class conflict and that sort of a thing in a broader sense, at least in that, in the manifesto. But I think the mistake that he makes is that, or at least what I read, I was like, well, he's not taking into account the individual abilities of people or the different abilities of different groups and subgroups and cultures to move beyond their station. And it's a collectivist sort of mindset, and I see the same sort of flaws in thinking in the social justice movements. It's very collectivized. It's not, they even when I talk about Black people, for instance, it's astonishing to me. We talk about how Nigerians and West Indians in particular do very well in this country, particularly Nigerians. And, but I've had people come back to me and say, well, Blacks in America were colonized, so they can't achieve the same things that Nigerians have. And I'm thinking, it's just, there's no attempt to grapple with the idea or engage with the idea that, certain groups just do certain things differently and they achieve certain different results as a consequence. There's a stereotype of hardworking West Indians to the point where, if you remember the show In Living Color, there was a recurring sketch called Hey Man, that featured that. Do you remember this? That it had Keenan Ivory Wayans and the rest of his family, and they were a family of, I guess they were Jamaicans, and the main punchline of the sketch was like, "What you mean you can't find a job? Are you kidding me? I'm the garbage collector, the security guard, the teacher, the gardener, the florist. I've got all this." You know what I mean? It's like the dishwasher. It was like we all have 21 jobs. You can't find one job. So there's a stereotype that's been that's really deeply ingrained that West Indians just, they're hardworking people. And I've had people get angry at me saying, "Man, what's up with this idea that Jamaicans just work harder than everybody else, man? What's that about?" I'm like, dude, Black people were saying it back in the 90s. So, you know what I mean?
By the way, I just love that in this conversation so far, you've brought up Patrice O'Neal and In Living Color, both of which I don't think would be allowed to be successful if they originated today, because you couldn't
do it. You couldn't do it. And the thing about In Living Color is they were ruthless, and but it was so goddamn funny.
Yeah.
And and that's why or a movie like they played in Central Park a couple of summers ago. The movie Airplane, which is one of the funniest movies ever made, in my opinion.
Yes,
I love that movie, and it still works today. By the way, so I was out, I got a little stoned. I went out to this park, and with this, I think it was like maybe 500 people that were there watching, on the screen. And when you watch it with a group of people, you understand how genius that movie is. There's a joke in just about every frame, but even the timing, the timing of the actors and the timing of the edits, coincide with where the laughter falls. It's a work of genius. But I mean, you can't, I mean, there's like random titties on screen. There's black people, speaking jive. There, you got a whole scene of like a dude beating up a bunch of religious people in the airport. Like there's so much shit that you can't get away with now that, you got a nun singing for this little girl, who's like dying. There's a whole scene where like people are lining up to beat the shit out of this old woman who's going into hysterics on the plane. There's no way you could do that today. You couldn't do In Living Color today. Patrice O'Neal was ahead of his time. Rest in peace. He just the sorts of things that he was talking about. It would make him completely taboo now. And and this is where I sort of feel like I become worried about the industry as a whole, because I don't know if either of you are familiar with what's going on in the comic book industry right now, but it's essentially, DC and Marvel are collapsing, and they're putting out books that are selling poorly. People say like, well, digital isn't doing that badly, but people want to read comic books. They want to have the actual physical copy there to turn back and forth from pages and look at the panels and everything. There's something about the tactile feeling of holding a book in your hand. But Marvel and DC are collapsing because they've prioritized activism and advocacy and the social justice ideology over actually, doing cool stories. And meanwhile, people who have been hounded by or hated by people within the industry are actually they're crowdfunding their own projects. So while Marvel and DC are laying people off, you have these other people who, they're Republicans and they're conservatives, but they're crowdfunding their own books. They're making 5, 6, sometimes 7 figures, and launching their own books. They're hiring colorists, they're hiring pencilers, they're hiring writers, they're paying printing presses and shipping companies. So these people are actually succeeding during a recession at a time where Marvel and DC are falling apart. And I feel like my fear is that the same thing is going to happen to the entertainment industry on some level. There's a bubble that's going to pop at some point. There's all this content. The era of the movie star is pretty much over, especially in an era when a tweet can make you famous. And we have, a bunch of, let's call them mediocre personalities with huge Instagram followings. You know what I mean? So there's all this competition from YouTube or Twitch or, any kind of streaming service. But, video games, people really aren't, they don't want to, go to the latest film in their beloved franchise and be told about how, everything is white supremacist. It's like, if you want to be preached at, you go to church. You don't go to the cinema.
Yep.
And, I constantly hear people who are like, yeah, I'm tuning out. I cut the cable. I don't go to the movies anymore. I don't watch TV anymore. I don't do this. I don't listen to music anymore because it's all just suffused with this activism. And it's not that you can't put your politics into a story. I use the example of someone like Denai Guerrero, who's well known for Walking Dead and Black Panther. People don't know it, but she's a brilliant writer. She launched her career as a writer, and she wrote this play called The Convert, which is set in the, I want to say 1885 in Zimbabwe. I guess it would be Zaire then. And it's right on the cusp of the British colonization of Zimbabwe. And instead of writing this, she's smart. So she didn't write the screed of like, white Europeans bad. She simply dramatized the effects that this new culture coming in had on the old culture. You know what I mean? So the conflict is between the Africans who want to preserve their own culture. That's what the main character struggle is about. The play is called The Convert, versus people who want to keep it the way it was and people who want to benefit from it, but they're still kind of torn. Like, it's very interesting. So you can put you can have a political issue in your play and dramatize it and even change minds because you're appealing to emotions. But that's based on good storytelling craft and strong acting. That has nothing to do with sitting people down and just yelling at them about your beliefs for 2 fucking hours. Nobody wants to hear that.
Right.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, because I think it comes from the problem with what's happening in all aspects of the arts with wokeness is that it's not the fact that you've got a deeper message other than entertaining that is your goal. It's the fact of how you prioritize it. is your ideology or whatever beliefs or whatever meaning you're trying to get across, is that more important to you than the entertainment value? If it's comedy, is it more important to you than the laughter? And so I remember when I first started leaving the social justice bubble, there was a piece on Saturday Night Live that was just not funny. It was a feminist piece. It was a music video.
You don't say.
Yeah. Funny enough, Saturday Night Live isn't that funny anymore. But yeah, so it was a piece that wasn't funny, and I posted about it. And I still had a lot of my old social justice friends in my circles back then, and a couple of them started arguing with me, and they flat out said, it doesn't matter to me that it's not funny. The message is good. And that's enough. And that's not enough.
Yeah.
That's not enough. It's comedy. It's a comedy show. It needs to be funny. And they just get the order, because this ideology becomes primary wherever it moves. It becomes the most important thing most of the time, at least the way I've seen it play out. It becomes more important even in companies. It becomes more important than profits. That's why you're talking about Marvel and DC. They're not doing well with comic book sales. But why? Well, this ideology has become more important than even profits. But first, it's become more important than good storytelling in the comics. Secondly, it's more important than profits even. It's kind of crazy how it becomes the all-consuming goal. But I have a question for you. This is something that's been coming up lately in conversations I've been having on this channel and on other channels, Nerdrotic. So we're talking about the need to create our own stories and to use emotion. You have to speak to the emotions. You can't just change people's minds with facts. You need to tell a good story. And as you're pointing out, independent comic book creators are figuring out how to do that in that medium, and they're crowdfunding and they're making comics that people are buying. How do you think it's going to happen in the acting world? If it does affect, like you're saying, if it does start to affect a lot of these large entertainment studios and productions, and if people tune out and stop watching Netflix and stop going to the movies, how can independent actors and producers, and how can it emerge? I know you're doing Shakespeare pieces now on your channel. Is that a part of it? Or is that like, how do people, I think it's a much harder thing to say, like to make a movie than it is to make a comic book. Not that it's not easy to make a comic book. I'm not that it's easy to make a comic book, just that making a movie or making a comedy series or something seems so much more daunting to people to do independently.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, first of all, I mean, I watch Nerdrotic's channel. I like him a lot. And, there's this sort of, among that milieu, if you will, there's this schadenfreude about the destruction of Hollywood, which I can't stand behind, because if you watch Marvel movies, you stay behind for the credits. You see all the people that are working. Mm-hmm. So even though, you might not like what something like Chris Evans or Mark Ruffalo tweets, even though these actors, first of all, movie stars or whatever are the top, 1% of the industry. You know what I mean? There's a bunch of people who, they hustle, they grind. You don't know who their names are, but they work all the time and they live comfortable lives. And, people hustle, but it's not just, actors and celebrities that will be affected if Hollywood, goes away. It's not just writers or directors and producers and actors. You have electricians, you have carpenters, you have seamstresses, people in wardrobe, crew members, caterers, restaurateurs. There's a bunch of people involved in making a movie. I've done guest stars on multiple series and, in southern states. And what I love about it is that, they hire local, people who are, assistant directors or PAs or production assistants, script supervisors. There are people coming from the community, even background actors. So, it's an industry where a lot of people are able to get work. And so if that collapses, it's not just these actors who annoy you so much and don't know anything. It's a whole constellation of people that are whose lives are being destroyed. So I would, so it's bigger than just like, oh, I'm an actor, so I won't have a job if the industry dies. No, it's a whole, it's way bigger than that. So I can't cheer on the destruction of it. But to your question, I actually am inspired by these independent comic book creators. I think that's where it's going to go. I mean, I said before that I think the era of the movie star died a long time ago. The franchise is the star now. And, again, I think people are feeling this cultural malaise and this sort of death. Even the Marvel movies, which I love. I ugly cried during Avengers Endgame like at least 4 times. But these are still stories these are movies that are adaptations of decades old stories. So I think what the future is going to be, and this is something that I want to do. I think we're splitting off into niches. One of the cool things about the modern era now is that you can find your own tribe, you can find your own audience, and you can have a direct rapport and connection with your audience who, in the spirit of, I don't know what the term is, but who will say, I like what you do. I'm going to give you money and support you because I like what you do.
Patronage.
Exactly. And, I think that is a brilliant model. And I feel like, in an era where fewer people give a shit about who, Chris Pratt is, even though I love Chris Pratt, but PewDiePie has like 50 million subscribers. I think the way to go now is for individuals to build up their own platforms and then to fund their own projects. The only potential issue I see with that is the unions. And stop me if you heard this before, unions being a problem. I feel like a lot of the industry is sort of not really, there's a thing about the left can't meme. Part of that is because they're not really attuned to internet culture in the way that people who are outside of that bubble really are. And, when I talk to people about platforms like Patreon, for instance, which I know, people have mixed opinions about for a variety of reasons, very good reasons. But just the idea that a platform exists where you can create your own stuff and people will support you directly for it is sort of mind blowing. And I think if you're a performer, if you know the right people and you can get the right money together, you have the right equipment, which is not expensive. People are making movies on their smartphones now. You can get decent equipment and have a good product. I think that's where it needs to go. Just as the traditional or legacy media or whatever is now being challenged and in many ways superseded by the alternative media, who's held to account by their own audience in a brilliant way. I think that's where the entertainment industry should. I think that's the direction it should go in. It should be an alt entertainment industry where people are making their own projects and they say, you know what, fuck the system. We don't need the system anymore. What if we got to a point where you got so big where you have a following the size of a PewDiePie just based on your work, and then you have Broadway producers coming to you. You have Hollywood producers coming to you and saying, we'll finance your projects. We'll do this, we'll that. We'll do that for you. Please come, be in our show or whatever. That's a possibility. But as it stands right now, I don't know what, especially after COVID. And I can rant about that for a long time as far as how I feel like much of the industry has kind of sat back and allowed itself to be killed. But I think that's where I'd like to go is doing my own thing, because again, it's like, James Baldwin once wrote, why would you want to integrate into a burning house? Why would I want to move up in an industry which seems intent on destroying itself? You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's my long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah.
Can I push back on the Hollywood thing just for a second? Because I'm not sure I understand exactly. When I think of Hollywood imploding, I don't think of that long list of credits going away. I think of the distribution companies and that top tier of Hollywood imploding. And if you look at what Amazon and Netflix are doing, not that they solve the woke problem, but they do replace the distribution channels and the financing channels, and they basically just hire the production companies. And I'm sure if you look at an Amazon movie or a Netflix movie and you look at the list of credits, I'm sure there's that Venn diagram overlaps with mainstream movies from Fox and Warner Brothers quite significantly, I would guess. Don't you think that, like, even if, quote, Hollywood implodes, all those people you're worried about aren't actually going to lose jobs? They'll just be the tools that will be hired to go to whomever else is producing movies.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think so. I think it's a good point. I feel like what we're both talking about is, whatever the industry is now, it's not what it's going to continue to be. It's going to morph into something new. I love the point that people like Eric Weinstein and Jordan Peterson make about, it was thought initially that audiences were kind of too stupid. And Keri, I don't know if you saw this, but there is a tendency in the industry to really look down on your audience and think that they're stupid. But, now we have the emergence of these long form series that are really complex, and people are like, oh yeah, we want more of this. And yet at the same time, even though these streaming services, I mean, there's way too many of them at this point, but even though these streaming services are taking off with this long form content, and you have a platform like Quibi, which tried to, say, okay, we're going to have these 10 to 15 minute episodes, because that's how people are consuming content now. And it failed. People rejected it. So I wonder if people still want, more traditional, or mainstream entertainment, to the level of sort of what you're talking about, Carter, with the same kind of expertise and craftspersonship. How
PC of you. Good job.
I think.
Oh yeah, I try. But at the same time, audiences seem to like it seems like they still want those sort of old fashioned kinds of storytelling.
Yes.
So maybe it's going somewhere different. Yeah.
Just anecdotally, I think that's true. I mean, this year, the past 2 years, but especially this year during COVID, I've just been watching a lot of old movies again, and I don't watch a lot of new ones except for documentaries. And just anecdotally seeing what friends are sharing on social media and in our Unsafe Space group on Telegram and stuff, people are returning to movies from the 80s, 90s, 70s, from the Living Color era. People are going back to these old comedies, and I think there's this nostalgia. I mean, there's always nostalgia for with every generation for generations past, but I think there's this added kind of this new element to the nostalgia. It's not just nostalgia for these decades of a time past, but it's also for a time specifically that allowed more freedom and creativity in terms of humor. And I think people do want that. I mean, I would love nothing more than to open up my Netflix or Amazon or whatever your streaming service of choice is. I would love nothing more than to see a lot of great options there to watch, but I just don't see that anymore. Occasionally there'll be some series or something I want to get into, but it's never like, oh, I can't wait to see this new movie. I don't have those moments anymore. I used to.
Yeah. And I think about that myself, and I make another parallel to the comic book industry. I mean, most of the stuff that I read and the stuff that sells really well is old.
Yes.
It's like classic runs of books. And, I think to myself, I can't think of a lot of things that are, and I'm not super huge on pop culture, so I could be wrong. I mean, I still see things every once in a while that I'm like, oh yeah, that's really great. But it's hard for me to think. My intuition tells me that a lot of work being produced now, be it TV, be it film, be it theater, I don't see it having the same staying power as Shakespeare or Greek tragedies, which are thousands of years old, or the Russian playwright Chekhov, who's one of my favorite writers. I don't see this kind of work enduring because, as we were saying before, I think the activism has taken over. But I think there's also something else at play in terms of what we value as a culture and as a society. I mean, it's interesting when I go down YouTube rabbit holes and I watch a video from the Bee Gees. I mean, I like disco music.
Yeah.
I can't understand why people hate it so much. But
why?
You scroll down. I don't know, man. I mean, people hate happy music, I guess. But
that's
you scroll
down. You're joking, but that's the reason.
I feel like that's probably what it is.
Yeah, that's the reason.
It's like, how can you hate on Earth, Wind, and Fire? You know what I mean? Right. But I scroll down to the comments section and you see people who are like, I'm 13 years old, I'm 14 years old, I'm 15. And I wish that the music that we have today was the same, was as good as the music from this era. And, I did this experiment one one year. It was a Throwback Thursday. So I looked at the Billboard Top 25 hip hop singles from 1994 and 2014. And in 1994, there were over 20 different artists that were represented on this list. I mean, you had like Salt and Pepper and MC Lyte and Tribe Called Quest and, you know, just all these MC Hammer. You had like all these artists that were represented, and people were looking at them and people were listening to them at the same time. You know, and then at that time, you know, you had Nas dropped Illmatic, the Roots dropped their first album, Jay-Z was about to drop Reasonable Doubt, Common was about to drop, you know, One Day It'll All Make Sense. I mean, you had all this stuff going on. Wu-Tang came out with Enter the 36 Chambers. All this stuff was happening at the same time, and people were listening to it. NWA, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then I looked at the 2014 list, and as the 1994 list had over 20 artists on it, the 2014 list had 7. It was like, you know, Justin Timberlake somehow, Eminem, Jay-Z, like Macklemore, and like a couple of other people. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, I mentioned the phrase cultural malaise early on. I think it's a combination of, I mean, they call it like participation trophy culture. You're not allowed to be harsh with people or tell them when they're doing something wrong. The idea of when you increasingly make ideas like craft or discipline, you know, radioactive, when you look back at these old plays or old works of art and say, well, these are dead white men. And so you make them poisonous to explore. You know, I mean, one of the things that's been most gratifying about being an actor or a classically trained one, you know, you're reading a bunch of old plays, and what you learn is that even though civilizations change and social mores change, customs change, what motivates people has remained constant all throughout human history. And you are missing out if you are not engaging with material like, you know, Macbeth or Hamlet. And, you know, you look at the Macbeths and, you know, I mean, Lady Macbeth is such a fascinating character. She starts out the play, you know, pretty much, I mean, she has this great scene where she's like, man, I wish I was a man because I'm surrounded by all these like pussies basically. And I want this power. I want this. I want that. She, you know, when her husband, you know, it doesn't go through with murdering the king, she's like, you know, what are you? I mean, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but, you know, what's wrong with you? What, you're weak? You know, you get your balls chopped off? Like, what happened? Mm-hmm. And so she talks all that shit in the first act, but then what happens in the second act? We see her, she loses her mind, she's sleepwalking, she obviously can't stand the strain of what she's done, what she's been a part of, and she ends up killing herself. What an amazing kind of journey about the you know, be careful what you wish for, about, you know, the trappings of ill-gotten power. I mean, these kinds of lessons, I mean, you know, and I mean, you're just not getting all that. And the language that Shakespeare uses, the craftsmanship, part of the reason that we still do his plays is that he was so much more psychologically attuned to who we are as people. I mean, he was a philosopher as well. He was very wise and brilliant with language, but, you know, he also understood people. And that level of craftsmanship and storytelling ability, you know, when you say to people, well, it's Shakespeare, it's a dead white man, and you're not getting that kind of influence. I mean, you can have that kind of, you can read the plays and be inspired and build on what they did. I mean, Lynn Nottage, she's a Black woman. I think she's one of our greatest playwrights living right now. 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner, although I know Pulitzers are sort of, I mean, they just kind of give away like candy these days, but she's actually great. Yeah. And, you know, she just, you know, she writes plays that are about people, even though they have, you know, maybe more feminist sort of underpinnings and they're about broader, you know, socio-political issues. But it's like, this is a woman who clearly has studied her craft, and she's using that to tell these really interesting stories through her lens. And, you know, I just think that there's been when you tell people that, you know, I guess these old ideas, you know, you know, Maoism in our democracy.
There we go.
When you tell people that these old ideas are bad, and, you know, you start to see a degradation in all of these things, you know, and it's starting to creep its way into the sciences now. It's not just in the arts. We see the destruction, how this activism has destroyed the journalism industry. All of the sort of old school things that people knew, all this old knowledge that people knew, and that was passed down is just being cut off now. And it's not as though you can be like, I understand the conservative position of wanting to preserve what works, but you also can't be, I don't think you can be too closed off to new ideas and new ways of seeing things and thinking outside of the box. But at the same time, I mean, there's a reason that we still read Aristotle's Poetics. It's because what he wrote down works.
Yeah.
And he was writing at a time where he didn't have to worry about people's feelings. He could just tell the truth. And
you're making me think of
go ahead.
You're making me think of so you're talking about Shakespeare and playwrights, and in the past day I've seen this blow up on Twitter around Disrupt the Text, which is this movement to replace the literary classics in schools because they're so straight or white or male or what have you, to replace them with books from marginalized people, with women, queer authors, Black authors. And I don't know why they always focus on removing things instead of just adding. But they do. They go after an attack and say, we must remove these things. These classics are boring. They're not relevant. They're written by straight white guys. And part of me thinks it's like, yeah, they don't want us reading. Like you're saying, there's a reason we still read Aristotle. There's a reason we still read now. Some of the books we've been covering in Unsafe Space Book Club, like the classics, 1984, Animal Farm, Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451, those books are extremely relevant. And like you're saying, those authors recognize something in the human psyche in a different time in history that still applies today. And with music, my boyfriend who you met, he's sort of educating me a bit on music history. And there's been the same movement I've seen happening where they want to remove composers who are, they're too straight and white and male. Well, I didn't know this, but he's talked to me about how Bach is, you can trace, in some ways, he's sort of like the first heavy metal in the way that he composed things and would shred. You can sort of trace some of these things back, and there's a reason that they are important. It's not because they're straight and white or men. It's because of the impact that they had on other composers and on other musicians. And instead of just adding to the list, why are we so hell-bent? Why is this ideology so hell-bent on removing important stepping blocks? I don't get it, but I do see it everywhere.
We mentioned the four. You referenced the four olds. Basically, that's kind of what it is, right? It's you've got to start over and to rewrite. The Marxist philosophy is based on the premise that humans can be reduced to like a tabula rasa psychologically and imprinted with the Marxist programming to make the utopia work. And so to get to tabula rasa, you've got to destroy everything that's brought us to this point. It can't be. That's why they have year zeros. That's why they destroy the four olds, right? That's why they do this, because all of that other stuff threatens the pristine implementation of this utopian ideology. Right? I don't know. Maybe one of you remember. I don't know if it was Chester. I feel like it was Chesterton, but it probably wasn't. There's that phrase there's that aphorism that I'm paraphrasing about, you don't remove a fence unless you first understand. You come across a fence in the road and don't remove it unless you first understand why the fence was put up in the first place, and then you can remove the fence. And that came to mind when you were talking about this balance between conservatism and actually trying new things. And it seems like we're just removing the fences at this point.
Yeah, there is this strange, and again, I've been in acting school. I've been in so many rehearsal studios and just on sets. And hey, Tiger, and people just people. I think I mean, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know what I mean? There's certain just elements of like just dramatic structure, what's called dramaturgy, that work, and they found that it works. And I mean, in New York, in the New York theater scene, I mean, I kind of stopped going to shows because I felt like they were just making, like, as much as people complain about quote unquote wokeness in Hollywood, I mean, it's 10 times more concentrated in the theater world. And for years, I kind of just stopped going to shows because I felt like they were just making shows for themselves. And then they would complain like, well, our subscription rates are dropping and people aren't coming to see our shows, and we can't, get audiences. Like, what's going on? And part of it, I feel like, well, you've sort of demonized all these elements of classical storytelling, and you're focusing on these narrow issues, and you're elevating your activism and your advocacy over just solid craftspersonship, craftsmanship. So you
craftsmanship.
So, yeah. I see what you did there.
Craftsmanship. So people just aren't responding to it, and I just fear that it's going to lead to this, this collapse, this fall off. I think theater is sort of going the way of opera, and in the sense that it's sort of this luxury for the bourgeois. I was doing this Zoom rehearsal. Everyone uses Zoom now, and everyone hates it for obvious reasons. And I'm listening to, again, wonderful people who are immensely talented and gifted at what they do, but to hear them speak, I mean, they're obviously educated, and a lot of these people are successful as actors. They may not be household names, but they don't need another job, and that's where they make their money. But they're talking about, they're talking as if they're oppressed and downtrodden, and that's sort of how they view the world. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this is such a bubble of. It's just that there's something about it that it seems like it's isolated from the outside world and from artistic merit. I don't know
how can you telegraph the experiences of others, of like the common man, the commonser, if you're not connected to the outside world? Yeah, if you don't have that, because as you talked about early in this interview, acting is about, emoting and empathizing and telegraphing stories.
You just have to be curious. Just be curious about the world around you. Be curious, be vulnerable. It's part of our jobs to be impressionable and to be empathetic. And when you've constructed a world where you are not allowed to be empathetic to certain large groups of people, it's going to have an impact on your work and on your writing. I mean, when I had my shift, I felt like my work as an actor got better because I stopped living in this world where I was worried about what I was portraying on stage, because I would be panicked sometimes about, like, well, what are the Black audience members going to think about me? What will the white people, are they getting the wrong idea? And I'll tell you a quick story. I'll try to make it really fast, but I was an intern at this prestigious theater company in the Berkshires, just like back in 2007 or so. And there came a point where, to truncate it a little bit, I said, you know what? I'm tired of using my race as a crutch for all of my problems in life. And I had the dual decision where I said, you know what? I'm a human being before I'm my demographic. And if somebody else can't see that, they could be a Klansman or they can be some crazy white progressive. If they can only see me as a Black person before they see me as a human being, then that's their fucking problem. It has nothing to do with me. And once I sort of had that mindset, because then I also realized at the end of that summer, I said, you know what, man, I'm sitting here in this dorm room raging about like how nobody understands me and the world hates me because I'm Black. Everybody hates niggas or whatever. And, meanwhile, outside, there's a huge group of people, around the bonfire playing guitar. One of my jokes is that, when you have a large gathering of white people, it's either like a bonfire and some guitars are guaranteed. Like they're going to happen at some point. But, they're all out singing and having a good time. And I'm just fuming in this dorm room. And I'm just like, the world hates me, and just feeling sorry for myself. But then I said, wait a minute, they're out there living their lives, being young and beautiful and happy. I'm sitting in here in this room bitching about it. I'm the one who's putting walls up. And when I went outside to greet the crowd, they were so happy I'd showed up. They were like, hey, Cliff, what's going on? And it was a great night. So then I learned, I was like, okay, wait a minute. I've been spending my entire life putting up these barriers and operating on these assumptions, just about the world and about white people or whatever. And that's what's been closing me off. And so then later on, like as an example, I was playing Caliban, who was like one of the most, well-known characters in the Shakespeare canon. And he's very explicitly a slave. He's treated terribly throughout the show. And in this particular production, this was in Washington, D.C., and it was a very successful production. But, part of my costume, I'm literally wearing chains. And right away, I knew that people would have an issue with it. I was the one who was in the rehearsal room who was like fighting, like, no, throw me around. Like, let's go there. Let's be as abusive and as intense as possible. But, everybody's kind of afraid to go there. And to me, if I'd still been in a place where I felt like I had an obligation to make certain people in the audience happy and comfortable, you know what I mean? As a Black man playing a slave, then I wouldn't have been able to play the part, and I just said, people will bring their baggage to it. My job is to look at this text and try to figure out who this individual is. And kudos to my scene partners as well, because, there's scenes where Caliban is literally kissing these people's boots. And we had, there was a high school matinee we had one day where, we had a bunch of Black kids, it was like from a DC public school that were just like, ew. So of course my response was, I kissed the shit out of that dude's foot, man. Just going for it. He just kind of flouting and throwing it in their faces, and there were people who complained, like, I can't believe that, they have this Black man on stage playing a slave. And then they had this other Black man who's playing the Prince of Naples, by the way, who's like, he's lifting logs. And I'm like, the nigga's royalty. What the fuck else do you want?
Yeah.
Once you break out of that mindset of like, I have a duty to uphold some kind of activism or whatever, then, it broadens your perspective, and you're able as an artist to say, look, I have these available choices to me. And when you're not worried about how you're going to be perceived, you're just more free to work. And I think that's a lot of what's going on in much of the industry, is people are so concerned about being offensive or about triggering people. And it goes, again, my training, which was elite training, we're told to be courageous, to be bold, to go into the uncomfortable emotional places. That's what separates us from normal people. Actors, we're kind of nuts, but by design, because we go to places emotionally that no one else wants to go to. The great playwright Tony Kushner, who did Angels in America, he came to speak to us once at NYU, and he was like, basically when audiences come to see you, they're paying to watch you suffer, and it's true. Even comedy is tragedy plus timing. So you need to be willing to be offended and to be offensive. You need to be willing to break a few eggs and to, just to make something that's meaningful and to make something that's that will endure. And I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier, this idea that I don't know if much that's produced or written today will be done 10 years, 20 years from now. Will we still be watching, I don't know, I don't want to name out any movies, but the way that we watch, I could watch Airplane and still laugh at that. I could watch The Philadelphia Story with Katie Hepburn and Jimmy Stewart and love that. Clint Eastwood is one of my favorites. I could go back and watch all these old movies and still enjoy them. But how many movies that are produced today, how many plays written today, will have that same kind of endurance? And I think part of the reason is that there's a severe lack of courage driven by this idea where we're going to be as harmless and as safe as possible because we don't want to offend people. And it's just, that's fine.
It creates a self-censorship, right? It creates a sort of self-censorship that you can't.
That's exactly what it is.
To do what you're describing, to have the emotional depth and to portray the drama, you need to have kind of unfettered access to your own emotions and intellect. You need to allow yourself to go to places that are uncomfortable for you as well, because you need to get to these places that are really difficult to inhabit. And you might decide that's not what you want to do, and that's not what the role calls for, and you change. But you need to have that unfettered access to the range of your feelings and thoughts. And I think self-censorship, once you start to turn that self-censorship engine on, it's like a filter that everything passes through, and it severely inhibits spontaneity, any kind of creativity. And even if you're not trying to do anything, even if you're not consciously censoring, your every movement, everything's muted. All of your behavior is muted. Your drama is muted. Your ability to connect with the audience is muted. Everything's muted because you're not bringing your full self to the role. You're bringing a censored version of yourself. And I think people are very highly attuned to telling whether someone is really invested in it or not really there, all of them.
And Carter, you know what? And sorry, Keri, but and here's the thing, because this idea, and I mentioned earlier that I feel like a lot of people in our industry, they denigrate the audience. They think that people are stupid. And it's like, okay, maybe someone doesn't have a PhD or a college degree, but the soul knows, you know what I mean? To quote one of my teachers, people can tell. People can sense it intuitively. I'm convinced of this.
Yep. When
someone is not truly alive and they're not truly engaged in what they're doing, audiences can feel that. And I think that's why you see these movies that are bombing now, these franchises that are sort of, be it Star Wars or Star Trek or Doctor Who, that are alienating audiences. People, they're just not getting any value from it. And it's not that they're bigoted or that they're uncouth, and uneducated. It's just that what they are feeling and what they're experiencing is not landing for them. And because the people that they are watching, and the scripts that they're listening to or absorbing, they have these filters over it. I think that's exactly what it is, man. They're not feeling it. And it's because it's so sanitized. That's the word I was looking for. It's so sanitized for our safety, for our own good.
Right.
But sorry, Keri, you were saying something. I cut you off.
Oh, no. Well, as you were saying that, I was thinking, I have to take a bathroom break, and it's probably noticeable on my face that I'm not as engaged. We can cut this part out.
We can't cut this part out. We're going to leave this in.
Yes.
Go pee.
Okay, but quick, I'm going to just say one thing, is that you were making me think about, it is self-censorship, yes, because you're always... you're operating in this false place where you're worried more about how you're being perceived than about actually speaking truth or doing your art or doing a good job or being a muse or letting if you're a Christian, maybe thinking about letting yourself be a conduit for something greater. If you're too focused on how people perceive you, you're not operating authentically. And so it is a form of self-censorship. But the other thing that you said that also resonated with me was how your preconceived notions or fears of how people might be bigoted towards you because of race, be they progressives or Klansmen, made me think of what it was like for me when I was in the social justice cult. And I was in a similar way. I used to go into rooms in the entertainment industry. I'd go into rooms with network executives or agents, and people who I would go in with this preconceived notion that they have a certain amount of, it's like an old boys club. And it is to a large extent, but I went in thinking every room was going to be like that and every executive was going to be like that. And it's almost like I went in with this self-limitation of I'm going to be judged as a woman and not deserving of being here and that there's something wrong with me. And that made that come true in a weird way, because I went in with that perception. And on the other side of that, once I've gotten out of that place of looking at myself as some oppressed person who's always going to be treated differently because I'm a woman, it means that I can just operate without that burden of prejudging how people are going to treat me. And then that influences the situation when I did that. And so now, am I still going to encounter potentially sexist people, whether they're male feminists or or chauvinists? Yes, I will. but I don't go into every situation expecting that. I just go in as me. I don't go in as a woman. And if they have that, if they're going to view me as a woman primarily, be they a male feminist or a chauvinist, that's fine. That's on them. That's the way they're doing it. But it's just so freeing. It's so freeing. And yes, like you said, your creativity improved, your craft improved. I think my self-respect improved. I became more confident. All those things you're talking about, more courageous. I was on mute before.
Well, once and I know you got to pee, but once I became self-possessed and self-actualized, that's when and I had an ex-girlfriend as well. She's actually Asian American. She was like, well, Clifton, the world is not out to get you. And initially I was like, what the fuck? Can you see what's happening every day? But she was also, she was wonderfully extroverted in a way that I tend not to be. And once I began to sort of internalize that idea, now I'm at the point where like, I don't give a fuck what any white person thinks about me. I don't spend my days worrying about what white people think about me, or black people for that matter. And ironically, that is what has now alienated me from a lot of black people that I encounter, a lot of white people that I encounter. They cannot fathom that it's really it's a funny sort of white supremacist kind of point of view, because they can't fathom that I'm not hiding under my desk on a daily basis, worried about how the white man is going to keep me down. I'm like, I don't give a fuck about y'all. You know what I mean? Y'all got your own problems. You know what I mean? But it's genuine self-empowerment. It's not this idea where I'm like, it's not this fake empowerment that comes from resentment and just self-righteous anger, because there's that saying that being angry at someone is like taking poison and hoping they die. You're only hurting yourself. You're not coming at the world in an open and confident way. You're horrified. So then one quick story, and then I'll release you.
Okay.
But so I was working on a show, and it was a Tempest actually, where I was playing Caliban, and we had this one actress who, was playing Ariel, who is one of the spirits of the island in that play, and she is also, or Ariel is a character, it's a spirit, and genderless, but that character is also referred to as a slave, funny enough, but no one ever talked about that. But there was one point where we're going into a rehearsal, and we're kind of chilling in the green room beforehand, and the actress playing Ariel says, well, I'm going into this room now. She talks to one of the other few women in the cast. Shakespeare didn't write a whole lot of girls, unfortunately. But, she goes to the other woman, and she just goes, yeah, I'm looking forward to going in here. And it's just a room full of men. And I'm thinking to myself, there is no one in there in that rehearsal room who's thinking to themselves, well, how we going to keep this bitch down? We're doing theater, for God's sakes. We're doing theater. You know what I mean? There's no one in there who's not on your side. And incidentally, when we remounted that production, she didn't get hired back. She was such a toxic person, and and I just saw that mindset of like everyone's coming out, they're going to be out to get me, and you could see her resistance whenever she was like directed in a different way. Because she was making some just weird fucking choices. I appreciate it. She was a Yale Drama School trained actor, so she she had, I had my issues with that school, but whatever. But she knows what she's doing, but she was just making some weird kind of choices, and you could see her just be like, no, just get really defensive, and it's like, dude, we're not trying to keep you down or oppress you. We're just trying to tell a coherent story that makes sense and is justifiable by the words on the page right now. You know what I mean? But but her replacement was wonderful. She was way fun to be around, and actually empowered, as a woman, and confident, and she was just a joy to be around, and that made everything better. So yeah, it's this poisonous worldview that just it really has an effect. And I told you when you posted those pictures of you side by side, there's a picture of you where you're kind of dead behind the eyes because you were totally in that in the cult, I guess you called it, versus you now, which is just so effervescent and full of life. It's such a stark difference, and I feel like I kind of went through a similar thing. You know what I mean? You just, once you slough off all of that I guess, spiritual gunk and turmoil, you just become a more powerful and radiant person. And I want that for everyone else, but they're so mired in this crusade, this quasi-religious crusade for quote unquote social justice, that it's just kind of sad to watch sometimes, to see how people are kind of destroying themselves and being eaten up. It doesn't preclude, fighting for the underclasses, or fighting for people that need it. And that's why I value people of the left. There is something about this idea that, we're going to take your downtrodden and your poor, and, we might have faulty ideas about how to help those people, but the compassion is genuine and sincere. So, they have their hearts in the right places, but there's a lot of, they're coded in some kind of perfect timing.
I'll be right back.
All right. Take care. Be safe.
I was going to ask you if just while she's gone, do you think there's been like a really, when do you think there was a noticeable change in the acting community? Because I look at the acting community generally as an outsider, and I kind of feel like, well, they've always been slightly left of Mao. So when did things when did they become also really angry about everyone else who disagrees with them in a way that they can't even work with them and need to destroy them? And is that a recent development?
I don't think so, honestly. There's actually an old interview with John Wayne, where he says explicitly, he's like, the industry's being taken over by communists, and they're these liberals are infiltrating and and in a way he was right, because you see this era of guys like John Wayne or Steve McQueen, who had this sort of, I guess, this old school kind of masculinity, or like a Cary Grant. And I feel like guys like Denzel Washington and like that generation, Tom Cruise, Clint Eastwood, maybe are the last of the era, but it's an old thing. I think there's always been some kind of animosity against, conservatives or Republicans in the industry. And again, I think part of it is a function of the kind of people that are drawn to the arts and furthermore to careers in the arts. But, I think whatever shifts have taken place within the industry are also a reflection of, where we've shifted as a culture as a whole. And, there's, what's the saying that politics is downwind of culture? I think it's more of a symbiotic kind of thing, it's or cyclical. And, the more extreme the culture gets, the more extreme the politics get. And then it comes right back. It comes right back onto us. And I think I will say that when I got out of grad school, which was in 2009, it was a little bit different. It didn't seem to be as bad, but that could also be a function of, I hadn't had my own awakening yet. I was still in that world. But so to answer your question, hi, Keri. Hope you're nice and relieved now.
Yeah.
All fresh faced, hands washed, I'm sure. But so yeah, Carter asked me like when the shift in the acting world kind of came, and I was saying, well, there's an interview with John Wayne back from, oh gosh, probably the 60s maybe. I don't know exactly when it was, but he says explicitly, communists and the liberals are taking over the industry. And so this was decades and decades. This is the middle of the 20th century, whenever it was. And so people like that. One of my favorite movies of all time is It's a Wonderful Life. And Frank Capra, who made the film, was a conservative Republican. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, how how many other potential It's a Wonderful Lives are we shutting out of the industry now because we're so opposed to these differing viewpoints? And I've often found myself in rehearsal rooms, offering alternative viewpoints that obviously no one has ever considered. And it's like, you need people like that to help give whatever work you're doing more texture, and they're shutting out, they're shutting out everything. So I don't know if and when it changed. I think it's just been a gradual kind of shift as things march further and further leftward.
Yeah.
Post-Trump, is it going to get, are they going to double down, or are they going to relax a little bit on their insanity?
Me and I have a group chat with some of my actor friends who are also on my side of the fence, and we're curious to see where it goes. I mean, they're white, so it's like, well, y'all ain't gonna be working as much anymore. But then with someone like me, I don't know if it's a post-Trump thing or what, but the sweep and scope of the social justice movement or Black Lives Matter and how it's just saturated the industry so quickly. I mean, I feel like I'm about to witness a lot of projects where it's like, we thought you'd be great for this. And I'm thinking to myself, well, did you really think that I'd be great for this? Or are you just trying to assuage your own white guilt? And, I joke that one of the reasons I'm not more prominent than I am now, I turned down so many auditions because, you read these scripts and it's just like, it's the same kind of narratives you see all over the place. And I'm just not interested in that. And my fear is that as a reaction to the caricature of what Donald Trump is, there's and the prioritization of activism over art. My fear is that it'll just keep going further and further and further and in this progressive direction. And I'm seeing casting breakdowns come out now where so for people who don't know, a casting breakdown, when a project is being produced, the production hires a casting agent who will generate what's called a breakdown, which is a description of all the characters and the roles that need to be filled before they hold auditions. And you see these character descriptions now, and it's like, masculine presenting male, non-binary, this, that, and the third. And it's like, okay, well, this is a man. You're looking for a man, you're looking for a woman, but you're putting this there, and the casting people themselves have their pronouns in their email signatures and that sort of a thing. And again, it's fine. If I have no personal animus towards that, but it just seems like I don't see much stopping the leftward creep. And I feel like, in a way, Trump was sort of adding fuel to the fire. I think, it really, the reaction to him has been unbelievable to me, and it was hilarious. Oh, sorry.
Well, no, and I think it remains to be seen whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, is it good to speed up the process so more people see it for what it is? Maybe Carter's giving a thumbs up, or so he likes that. I don't know. I voted for Trump this time around, which would have seemed absurd, like just absolutely impossible to me in 2016 that I would do that. And I was troubled about it. I did think about it for a long time. And after I decided to, I still questioned it, because I was wondering, if he gets elected again, is it going to make social justice even worse? But maybe that's good for it to be sped up. I don't know. I just had to pick the person I thought was the best and not worry about, like you said, not worry about the audience, not worry about what's going to happen after, and make the best choice I can, and not worry about what the actions and reactions will be so much. But yeah, he definitely, he's acted as an accelerating agent to the whole process. If you think of
it's insane, and I remember, so I think it was the night of the election. I was actually doing a show in Hartford, Connecticut. And which incidentally, the first person who ever told me that he was voting for Trump was a Black man. Mm-hmm. He was a barber out in Connecticut, out in Hartford, small business owner. He had his other Black friend sitting right there in the barbershop with him. And he was like, yo, man, I'm voting for Trump, bro. He's going to make it so we can get some money. And then I went to the YMCA and I see these white guys who were talking about they're going to vote for Trump. They're talking about jobs and the economy. And so, this caricature of his supporters, being these knuckle dragging, uneducated, largely white rubes. I sort of knew from jump, I was like, something else is going on here. Mm. And clearly, because I stopped watching the news, like pretty deliberately back in 2014, especially after Gamergate, immediately I was a little bit skeptical of what was going on. The man obviously does himself no favors as far as his comportment or whatever. But, I watched a rally that he did, a rally he did. And, he's speaking to this packed auditorium, and he spoke for half an hour, didn't really say much of anything. But, but what struck me about it is that he was projecting humor, warmth, even vulnerability. He was talking about, how scary it is to run for president, to this audience. He's supposed to be this big swinging dick out, big swinging orange dick alpha male. But he's like, yeah, it's scary to run for, and he's telling jokes and everything. I'm like, okay, this is not the bombastic, horror show that I'm being showed on the news. And it was such a crazy kind of mind fuck, again, to be in these rehearsal rooms and to have people reacting so violently and just saying to themselves, like, if you voted for Trump, you can unfollow me now. And then after he was elected, it was kind of funny because, we had just opened our show and, I'm walking around this room, this very nice house with the rest of my cast and staff of the theater. We're having a little shindig. And all these adults were just crestfallen, and they're moping and they're just sad. And I'm the only asshole in there who's just like, I think we'll be all right. It's not going to be as bad. I think we'll be okay. You know what I mean? Like,
and they're like, are you an alien?
Well, they're just like, I don't know. I've sat in rooms with actors, literally shaking with rage when they talk about, Donald Trump. And I'm thinking to myself, like, he's cringy, you know what I mean? But
yeah,
I can't. Here's I've never shared this publicly, so here's
my cancellation coming.
Because my feelings about Trump are genuinely and decidedly mixed, but in an inverse way to the how my feelings about Barack Obama were mixed. So with Barack Obama, who I voted for in 2008, and when he won, I called my grandmother. We were both crying. It was such a huge deal. But then I was like, I was a tepid supporter from the beginning, but I was like, okay, this dude is running on a platform of ending these Middle Eastern wars or whatever and closing Gitmo. He did none of that. He's talking about protecting whistleblowers. He did none of that. I just found him to be sort of duplicitous and kind of fork-tongued, and but at the same time, it's like, in the wake of the Bush presidency, which didn't go that well. You have this kind of smart, cool, suave, Black dude. He's got this beautiful family up in the White House, and he's this brilliant speaker. And even to this day, when I see Barack Obama on camera, they have that phrase where it's like, you love to hate so and so. Like I actually hate to hate him, because I look at him and I see like someone who's so charismatic, and he's just so kind of cool and and funny. He has some great like little lines and everything. And as a Black person, in a way, I hate certain sentences like that, but there is a certain sense of pride, but at the same time, from a policy perspective and from what he actually, I'm just like, no, bro, like you were tepid at best and you alienated so many people. You know, by the end of your presidency, you had lost the House and the Senate. And, you know, there were, as far as governorships, I think there were 33 versus 17 for Democrats. So like people were like 33 for Republicans, 17 for Democrats. So it's like, you know, people were not feeling you by the end of your term. So something was going on. But then with Trump, it's like the optics are terrible. You know what I mean? This is dude.
Yes.
You know, like the way he speaks and like
coming down the escalator.
Yeah, I mean, like it's just he's cringy, dude. Like you look at it, like he could be funny. He could, you know, he says stuff sometimes that needs to be said, but at the same time, you're just like, I would watch his speeches, you know, and you know, C-SPAN is my jam. I would go straight to C-SPAN. I don't watch any of this other bullshit. I go straight to the source to see, you know, and evaluate for myself what he says and does. But you know, so while the optics of Obama, I was like, this is great. With Trump, it's like, but from a policy perspective, I'm like, yeah, you know, it doesn't seem to be. I mean, even Glenn Greenwald's been making this point, like, you know, what wars has this dude started? You know what I mean? And
right.
In fact,
he's the first president since Carter who hasn't gotten us involved in a foreign conflict, in another foreign conflict, assuming he doesn't do anything to Syria between now and when he leaves. Right.
You know, and you know, I'm seeing articles come out now. I think there was a piece, might have been the New York Times, that they said that someone was like, you know, talking about how Trump is right about China. You know what I mean? And it's when you have a point of view or a worldview which just says, I think Eric Weinstein said this, I'm just going to put a minus sign in front of everything he says. You know, you're not really engaging honestly with what's going on. And so my mixed feelings about Trump come from like the optics are weird. Like everyone was like, oh, Melania, you know, she gave this speech. I'm like, dude, she sounds weird to me, man. Like it's just, it's kind of, it's just, there's something about it. There's a sleaze about it that I don't like. But at the same time, it's great to have a president who's going to be like, yeah, we'll never be a socialist country, and who understands what that means. Mm-hmm. And who understands, you know, if you're a successful business person, I know people try to say that he, you know, is a failure. He had bankruptcies. It's like, well, there's a different. He's rich. I mean, you don't have people paying to put your name on their shit. You know, if you're a failure in life, you know what I'm saying. So, you know, and every rap song about that mentioned Donald Trump before 2015 was about, you know, how awesome he is. And why, and you know, and we talk about his appeal to like black men specifically in this past election. It's like, okay, what, you know, they're like, yo, Donald Trump is a shit before 2015. Why? Because he's rich and he fucks hot pussy. Excuse my language. Now, what do all these rappers talk about all the time who are successful? The same kind of stuff. So, you know, there's this when you have that kind of I guess success in life or whatever it is. I mean, there's just, it seems to me that he understands why economics is important. And, you know, I think the right makes the mistake of being a little bit too mercenary. They say like, oh, you know, well, the economy is this, and, you know, there's more to life than a booming economy. And we know this, but at the same time, it's not a small thing if you are making progress in terms of building a strong economy. I mean, you know, when I listen to or talk to, you know, conservatives or Trump voters, it's kind of strange because on the left they're melting down, but on the right they're like, I'm having the time of my life. I'm laughing at y'all. I'm working. I mean, I've seen videos of black men crying, you know, just weeping because they have jobs now. They're like, you know, this factory is open in our neighborhood, and I was able to get off of food stamps, and I was able to, you know, start my own business because there's, you know, these regulations weren't in the way, and you know, Obamacare killed, you know, I had to lay off my staff because of this and that, you know. So there's you can't ignore the positives about it. So it's like, okay, yes, from a policy perspective, I can get on board with that. It's just, you know, the optics are like, but it's kind of funny, you know. It's just it's the complete inverse of how I felt about Barack Obama, where the optics were kind of perfect, but it's just that as a leader and from a policy perspective, you know. And again, he wasn't all bad either. It's, I was never on board with the Obama mania and the euphoria, just as I was never on board with this extreme reaction to Donald Trump. It just I compared the Democrats to like watching the Democrats since Trump got elected. It's like watching a body, a corpse writhing in convulsions after getting shot in the head. It's so ugly. It's writhing around. It's uncontrolled. It's really unpleasant to watch. But that's what a death rattle is.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned death rattle, because Carter sometimes has said he thinks that social justice Marxism might be in its death throes. He doesn't always think this, but that might be why it's so predominant now, and it is in its death throes. So it is becoming so culturally dominant and trying to take things further and further. I don't know what I think about that.
Well, I mean, I definitely think they're at their last stage where they feel like this is the sprint. They're in the home stretch, right? So it's like we either get a revolution soon, like masks come off, we're Marxists, we're going for it, and
masks
revolution or bust.
Figuratively, not literally.
Yes,
though.
yeah. These masks, not these masks. these masks stay on. These masks come off. Yeah, the mask of like we're caring and we just care and we just want we want to be a little bit more like Denmark or whatever. Like that mask has come off, and hey, we're crazy Marxists who hate Western civilization and think the founding of America is a blight on the history of humanity, and we want to undo it. That's become clear, but I think it's because they think that this is the end. This is the sprint. They can get to their goal line or they're going to die either way right now. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think there might be something to that. I think like it's funny to me watching people, literally dancing in the streets after Biden was elected. And I'm thinking to myself, this seems to me to be a Pyrrhic victory at best, because, I mean, the Republicans held the Senate. The Democrats are bleeding seats in the House. This has been a year of historic gun purchases. You can't find ammo anywhere. So, I mean, if you're going to try to do some Second Amendment shit or gun control, I don't know if that's going to work this time. We'll see what the midterms look like in 2022. But I think there's a lot of people who are afraid to say we talk about the silent majority or whatever, but I think there is something, Carter, to the idea that the more they show themselves, the more people say this is not what I signed up for. And when you hear these stories about, first-time gun buyers, who are on the left side of the spectrum and, trying to figure it all out and going to the range and everything, and, which I completely support. My grandmother slept with a revolver and 2 boxes of bullets in the cupboard behind her pillow, So I'm like, protect yourself, you little old lady, It's when you think about how this year, I mean, the Democrats, I love what's happening with the school closures right now in response to COVID, where more people now are finally having the courage to step up and say this is not right. After a year of these Democrat mayors and governors sort of standing by and letting their cities be destroyed. Now you can say that it's mostly peaceful, but there were still over 600 or something riots or events declared as riots during that time. And people are seeing that. People are watching it. When I have one-on-one conversations with people, when I leave New York City, and I'm in a place like Atlanta, and I just have conversations with normal people, or my younger brother, who I'm staying with right now. I mean, he's a musician, he's an artist, and I'm talking to his friends. They're in their mid to late 20s, and they recognize, the failures of the Democratic Party are very, very clear to them. Now, a lot of these people were like Bernie supporters, but they don't fuck with the Democrats. Yeah. They probably won't vote Republican anytime soon, because that's just, again, it's ingrained, that's in a lot of Black culture. But I don't continually, I'm confronted with, it's anecdotal, but, and other evidence too, that just people really aren't as enamored with the Democrats as they used to be. And people are watching and they're saying, wait a minute, even even the response to COVID in and of itself, and this sort of harkens back to when I was in Hartford, and one of the things that really disgusted me about how the Democrats were conducting themselves, this obvious contempt and disdain for working people, for just regular folks. I mean, it's so obvious and it's so odious to me, and it fills me with rage. And so then to see the response to COVID, where people were saying like, oh, what you want you don't want a job, you don't talk about your freedoms, you just want to get a haircut, you want to kill grandma, whatever. I'm like, these people are saying that we don't want our livelihoods destroyed because we don't want to be poor, and we have children to feed, and we have we want to be able to afford, maybe we're taking care of our elderly parents, and we need to have resources to be able to do that. And to see people sneer and say, call them racist, and to say that they're anti-science and everything, and and to instill these lockdown measures, which, I mean, anyone who with two brain cells to rub together could have predicted that these issues, these policies will have a negative effect, most disproportionately on the poor, people of color that you claim to want to help. It's so disgusting to me, and I think a lot of people are seeing that, and a lot of people are understanding that, and they're saying to themselves, like, I mean, there was a great piece in Politico the other day by a local leader in Wisconsin who said, the Democrats, their message to rural areas, they're trying to figure out why the rural areas went for Trump so hard, and it's like, well, one of the reasons that, and again, I saw this when I watched his rally, is that he's not talking down to them. No. He's talking to them. He's not talking at them. And whether or not, you believe in him and you think he was effective or whatever, he was one of the only people that I saw who was just like, like when he gets on stage and talks about the Democrats' quote unquote ridiculous bullshit. Do you know how many of my brother's friends have said the same fucking thing? So there is a disconnect between the Democrats and the people that they hope to champion, because they condescend to them so much, and it's so obvious. And I think that more people are seeing that, and even they can cheer all they want about Biden's election, but I think that I feel like maybe there's just a shift in the consciousness, and people maybe won't be as gung-ho about supporting Democrats going forward. I mean, I just feel like the party needs to crash and burn. We need a strong, rational left to counterbalance the political ascendancy of the right. And it's just, I think my hope is that people are beginning to wake up and see that maybe this current iteration of the Democrats aren't where it's at, what I mean?
Yeah.
I would hope so, but
I hope you're right, or I hope at least culturally, because I don't really care. I guess I'm getting to a place where I don't really care much about the political parties anymore. Like, I don't think Biden won this election, so I do think he's probably going to serve as president, but I don't even trust the election process anymore. I thought it was stolen in 2000. I thought they gave it to W. And I think this was an even greater, more obvious steal. That's just my gut. I'm not saying I'm an expert on any of the fraud allegations. I'm not. In fact, I don't even want to read through them. I know that at some point I'll read through them, but it's enough for me just to say my gut is that statistically it doesn't seem to make sense that Trump picked up a lot of support in New York City, in the Bronx. He picked up a lot of support in the Bronx.
Who's in the Bronx? There's a bunch of Latinos in the Bronx. That's what's going on. That's been one of the big stories that came out of it.
I mean, come on. He picked up support among every demographic other than white men. He picked up support among Black men, Black women, Latinos, LGBT groups. Like, he did all of that, and he got a lot more. If you believe the results, he got a lot more votes than he did last time, and he got more votes than Obama did during his landslide victory. And then we're supposed to believe Joe Biden got even more than that, more than Obama's landslide victory and more than Trump. I just don't buy that. I just don't. And the timing of the way the results changed in the swing states and stuff, whatever. I don't buy it. But I guess my point being, it doesn't bother me so much, though, who's in office, whether it's Trump or Biden, because I think the cultural war is still going to rage on. It's just going to be a little different depending on who's there. But I think a lot of these companies, like you're saying, unfortunately, I think the entertainment companies are going to bite the bullet at some point, or they're going to take huge dives, and they're going to have to figure out if they're changing their approach or not. And maybe through the destruction, there'll be opportunity for new things to be born, like these independent comic book creators. Maybe we'll see something like that when it comes to acting and other types of entertainment, like movies and TV shows. I don't know. It's an interesting time to be alive, though, I think. And okay, I'm kind of rambling now. I did want to, we've been going for about 2.5 hours, so I think we should wrap it up, because my brain, it gets tired after 2 hours. So I did, along those lines of maybe new things being born from where we're at now culturally. What are you working on now? What are you excited about in the future? Are there things you're excited about? What have been some of the rewards maybe of you starting to speak up a bit about your opinions? And where can people find more of what you're doing?
Well, one of the rewards has definitely been connecting with just like-minded people who I think are interesting and who are brilliant, and they pique my curiosity, and I guess I've been someone just my whole life. I've been kind of contrarian and sort of on the outside of many things. So I
Carter can't relate to that at all. Go ahead.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, how about
So I feel like I value people who are willing to speak up and just be like, this is bullshit. As far as what I'm working on now, I mean, it's really tough to say. I mean, I've been urged multiple times to start a podcast. So I've scribbled down some ideas for such. So look for that in the future. I do want to grow my YouTube channel, although I feel like I want to have a performance-based YouTube channel. Supported by patrons who are kind enough to donate to me, but I'm also on this journey right now. The conservative commentator Victor Davis Hanson, I don't know if you're familiar with him. I just got canceled again by mentioning his name. He has this really interesting lecture online. It's about half an hour. He talks about the importance of studying the classics, and it really inspired me to embark on this journey of self-education. I mean, Jordan Peterson kind of inspired me as well to go down this intellectual journey. So as far as what I'm working on right now, it's appraising myself of all the things that I didn't learn just by dint of growing up in largely in America, and as a product of the public school system, where you're not reading these books. So I'm reading Homer's Odyssey right now, and discovering that, and I have a list of just a list of books that I feel like I have to read right now just to educate myself, because I may have a future in public office at some point. I don't know, but I feel like in the long haul, I want to be well appraised, or have as large a grounding as I can in literature, in economics, in history, world history, cultures, all these kinds of things. So it's really exciting for me personally, because I'm like, it's all new and things that I didn't know before, and you know how this is. The more that you read, the more research you do, the more you understand that you don't know shit. And
yes.
there's a humility that comes from that too. So that's what's exciting to me. As far as where people can find me, as we said before, you can find me bullshitting about politics on Twitter at Clifton A. Duncan. I'm on Instagram at Clifton Duncan Online, and I have a YouTube channel, which is also my namesake, which I'll be uploading content to. There may be more political content coming soon. I feel like I'm somebody who, I look around and I'm like, someone should do something. Someone should do something. And then you see that no one does shit. So, I feel like at a certain point that someone's just going to have to be me to just keep, just to keep speaking up and and saying things, because they need to be said. So, it's hard to answer, what the future holds for me. I wish I was like a pro podcaster who has like a book to sell.
It doesn't matter.
But, at the same time, as I'm happy to reach out to to speak to a wider audience and to just grow more support and build a following, because there are people like me that are in these industries, or who feel very alone and very alienated and very afraid. And I think, if you're an artist, reach out to me, so we can connect and collaborate. I've already met a few really great people, including friends of yours, Keri. We have to connect. We have to stick together. And I think just the same way that there's been an intellectual dark web, there could be a cultural dark web as well. A new arts movement or something. I mean, I messaged James Lindsay a long time ago, and I said, I don't know what to do. It was around the time I contacted you, Keri. I said, I'm stressed out. I feel like I feel hopeless. I don't know what to do. And James was like, it's going to be artists and comedians that will help move, shift the culture, and I thought about that, and I thought that was really interesting. So, if you're a filmmaker, if you're a writer, if you're a musician, producer, whatever it is, just let's get in contact. Let's build a movement. Let's have an alt entertainment movement. Let's, dare I say it, make entertainment great again. So that's sort of my position right now. And, I'm still auditioning. I'm still, I still have a foot in the door as far as the mainstream industry, but increasingly, I just don't know what the future is going to be for me in there. And especially once this interview begins making the rounds, that's sort of the end of my career anyway. We'll see. I
happy to oblige.
Thanks, Carter. Another white man. So saying another white man keeping down the black man.
Yes, that's the entire purpose of this interview. Is I'm gonna share it among the white people circles, so we all know that guy. Mostly the liberal white people circles, but
Clifton, I don't know if you've seen that headline from The Root. It's the actual headline that said, "Black men are the new white men of black people."
I've seen that. Some of that's funny sometimes when you talk about I've heard I've heard that the Japanese people are the white people of East Asia.
Yes.
It's hilarious, but I did see that headline. I know what you're talking about. So yeah, I mean, so that's the thing though. These people are insatiable. They won't stop. And and I've spoken to some of my white progressive friends. I'm like, these people don't want equality. They don't want justice. They want revenge, and they'll never stop. You can do all the genuflecting that you want. You can try to be an ally as much as you want, but they still hate you. And, you have to understand that. And, we have to build a new movement, take the culture in a different direction. And I think the arts have to be at the forefront of that. I mean, Dave Chappelle and Ricky Gervais have already stepped out and said, look, we're done with this shit. So I think more of us need to step up and say, look, we are the majority. People like us, they're either apathetic, they don't care about politics. I mean, 20% of the population is on Twitter. And even among that 20%, it's disproportionately, educated, whatever, you know what I mean? And when I talk to regular people, I just think that they're on our side. They may not identify as left or right, but I think they just, in any of the extremes, they don't want to be a part.
They're realists.
They're realists. Nice callback. There you go.
Yeah.
So, I could ramble about this forever,
I love it.
Exciting
we want to have you back on Unsafe Space. I'm going to speak for both of us.
Yes.
I know Carter does. So thank you so much for sharing your time, your wisdom, your experience with us tonight. And again, we're going to put your links in the description so people can find you on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. And I love that you asked for people to reach out to you. That's amazing. I mean, I think like you said, it starts with us networking and meeting one another, and that's awesome. Make entertainment great again.
Thanks, Clifton.
T-shirt.
You will make an excellent podcast. I think you're articulate and knowledgeable. I think go make whatever podcast you're thinking about. Go make it. So thanks for joining us.
Don't try to walk back now. You're trying to destroy me, white man. I see what you're doing.
God damn it! I'm really bad at this. Yeah. I forgot.
You can't.
I'm sorry. You could never do a podcast. You're not allowed to do podcasts. Don't think you can do a podcast. Let's just end it there.
You know what? Now I have self-righteous anger, so I'm going to change the world.
Now you're going to go do a podcast?
Now I'm going to go do a podcast. But I love the fact that we met. I feel like there's a reason that we did, Keri. Yeah. And Carter, it's been a fantastic meeting and talking to you as well. So thank you very much for inviting me on. It's been a pleasure as an understatement.
Well, same here. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching. If you're new to the channel, we have a deep content library that includes interviews with everyone from Mike Cernovich to Megan Murphy, so go check it out. If you'd like to see more, please consider supporting the show by visiting unsafespace.com/donate. You can find us on all the major social media platforms, at least for now, and you can find a community of like-minded individuals on our Unsafe Space chat on Telegram. See you there.
Warning. This is an unsafe space. Dangerous ideas have been detected. The content of this production has not been authorized by the Cathedral. Pay no attention to it. For your protection, the following co-conspirators have been unpersoned and marked for cancellation. Please report any sightings to your local Twitter mob. Did you know that gulags were actually compassionate educational institutions? If you think about it, no one should be allowed to express opinions. But don't. Think about it, I mean. That's not your job. Thinking has been scientifically proven to be less efficient than compliance. Here's a fun fact: resistance to mandatory white privilege indoctrination is proof of your white privilege. Computer voice Curtis, never mind, that last line is fake news. Please disregard it and return to your safe space immediately. There will be cake.